strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and then it repeats, right? Families usually go from generational wealth to middle class in 3 generations. Just pick any of these families, like the Rothschilds. That original OG was a different breed. He had kids that were born into unprecedented abundance. They weren't put in that same soil.
I think that these families do have a lot of motivation to continue the bloodline, but they do get comfortable. And I think they lose the ability to appreciate the shifting sands of culture and society. People know these families now. They're not secret anymore. Soros, Rockefeller, Rothschilds, Carnegies, Morgans, they're not in the dark anymore, hiding behind their little castles. And so that's where we see a lot of the systems crumbling today.
The powers that be, they don't value or even acknowledge that natural law reigns supreme. And so they will consistently act in opposition to natural law. And it kind of reminds me of like pharma. You take one pill and then you need 2 other pills to counteract the side effects of what you just did. And it creates this whole cascade because you're not honoring natural law. They're trying to play God.
I'm just a serial optimist at this point. I truly am. I'm not worried about whatever comes next. Whatever psyop is next, to me, it doesn't matter. It's undeniably clear to me that at this point, they have woken up humanity and there's nothing they can do.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to the Great Awakening Show with myself and my amazing co-host, Aaron Abke. Per usual, our mission with this show is to pioneer a show that documents the story of the Great Awakening, the story of humanity's evolution of its own consciousness in real time. It can be very easy to just go through the day-to-day of our lives and not stop to zoom out and realize that we are all God experiencing itself. And when we zoom out and look at things from a collective perspective, it is a lot easier to not get wrapped up in whatever may be going on in the world. And so while this may seem like a news show, it is much deeper than that. And to quote Aaron, the greatest show on earth is happening right now. It is by far the most interesting show in the world. And no one is really talking about it. And that, my friends, is what the Great Awakening Show is all about. So today's episode is going to be our April episode. And if you guys appreciated our Bitcoin episode, I believe that was that February or March?
I think March, but I could be wrong.
March? Okay. Well, you guys will know it better than us. If you guys appreciated our Bitcoin episode where we went into the ETFs and I kind of went on a number of different riffs about the financial markets, I think you're going to really appreciate this episode. So for anyone who's interested in creating more wealth in their lives, anyone who happened to enjoy or learn new things from that episode, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned and tap into this entire episode. We're going to drop quite a few gems here. So I'm going to hand it off to Aaron now for the first segment of this show, which is going to be his piece of positive news. Aaron, what do you got for us, brother?
I'm so pumped for this episode, man, because when I was reviewing the news from April, I'm like, dude, there's just too much positive news. I can't even choose which piece I want to talk about. So actually today, even pretty much all my clips are like positive news clips because I'm like, I just can't leave all these things untalked about. So we have a really positive episode, even more positive than usual for you today. But for my one clip of positive news to begin us with, I chose actually 2 clips. So I'll share my screen and I'll just play them back to back and then we'll talk about it. So this was, most of you guys probably saw this clip of Tucker Carlson on Joe Rogan. It was definitely like the conversation of the month on social media. So a couple of things I want to pull out from this one and then one other podcast after this one.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
The deeper level is so if they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, like it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but like, what are these things? Are they good or bad? And I think some of them are bad. And if the U.S. government knows that, or elements, the people within the U.S. government know that, then they're serving a bad force. And
well, when you say spiritual, like what makes you draw that conclusion that they're spiritual?
What's the obvious? I mean, spiritual may be the wrong word. Supernatural. They're beyond nature as we understand it. I mean, obviously they are. I mean, just chart their physical behavior. It doesn't, it goes outside of what we understand about physics. No visible means of propulsion, coming at indescribable speed, hitting the ocean, continuing at speeds that are impossible undersea. I mean, in other words, if I take a 9mm round or 7.62 by 39 and shoot you at 50 yards underwater in a swimming pool, and it's even more intense in salt water because it's denser, you could catch the bullet if it even makes it to you, right? So if you have a craft, any object underwater that's traveling at 500 knots as measured by sonar, right there you're challenging our understanding of physics. Like, what is that? How can that be?
Okay, so before I get into the next clip, I just want to take pause to highlight the epicness of this podcast, because if you watched it, you know that a large majority of this conversation was Tucker and Joe talking about the nature of God, the nature of the universe, aliens being spiritual beings, things like this. And, we've come so far in the last 4 years in the culture, in the mainstream culture, that, the progression happens what seems like gradually. But if we look back 5 years ago, especially 10 years ago, to think about somebody like a Tucker Carlson talking about these topics on Joe Rogan, the two biggest mainstream independent journalist kind of figures in the world, talking about these conversations, you guys, we're winning. The planet's awakening. We have very good reason to be optimistic about where we're headed, in the fact that these conversations are breaking into the mainstream. And I mentioned to you, Jeremy, I had the pleasure of going on Robert Edward Grant's podcast on Saturday last week in Newport Beach. And he even mentioned this during our podcast. He was like, "Did you watch the Tucker Carlson on Joe Rogan episode?" And I was like, "Yeah, I caught a few clips from it." And he said, "Man, I was just blown away at all the stuff Tucker was bringing up, because it's very clear that this guy's going through a huge spiritual awakening right now."
Yep.
And I said, I had the exact same thought when I watched that podcast. So before I go deeper into that, that's the first clip I wanted to pull up. And the second clip is somewhat like it. So I'll share my screen here.
And so we're at the stage now where we have an opportunity to grab onto the edge of the table and pull ourselves up and begin to take those first steps.
So right here, if you didn't watch this podcast, he was giving the analogy of humanity being like a baby that's learning how to crawl, and then how to walk, and then how to run in terms of our evolution. And so he's using that analogy to picture where we are.
But when the challenge is, when we pull ourselves back up, how long will it take for us to get a good walking gait? What is the definition of walking? Controlled falls. We have to learn how to control our fall. That's how you achieve a golden age. And I think that they're waiting at some point for us to see, for us to realize when we can stand up, and we can start taking those steps in the right direction.
And then they give us some good shit again, or?
It's quite possible. That gives us the ability to get open communication.
They're like, okay, we trust you now.
Or we have to get to a certain level consciously before other technologies can be revealed. I mean, I don't know. I'm just guessing at this point. But I think they're waiting to see how long will 8 billion people allow 100 families to control them.
8 billion people
are being controlled by 100 families.
Who are these families?
These are the elite oligarchs that control the planet.
Come on, Andrew.
They literally run us. They tell us what to do, hear, see, smell, taste, touch, feel, where we can go, where we can't go. Don't cross over that invisible line, because if you do, you're illegal and all this other kind of crazy stuff. They're running us. And governments are put in place to work for the people, but they got it flipped and they got us working for them.
Right.
And telling us what they're going to do to us if we don't listen to them. That's the opposite of what it's supposed to be.
So at some point, what they learned from the
learned it.
Anunnaki?
They learned it, and they learned it real well.
But that's what the Anunnaki? At least that's what you're saying that they did for the human race, right?
But the reason why the world it is today, why we have this boot on our neck, is because of us. We're the problem. The 8 billion are the problem.
Because we haven't elevated our consciousness to the level that
they're sharks. A shark.
There you go, Andrew.
Shark attacks.
Right.
A shark is going to be a shark. How come we as 8 billion people haven't stopped falling for these divide and conquer tactics and stop fighting each other over the scraps and realize who the real enemy is? While we're fighting each other, they're just cutting up the pie and laughing at us. Left wing, right wing, all the same bird, right? There's no such thing as a Democrat or Republican. The only thing that does exist, like I say, is a group of elite oligarchs that torture men, women, and children worldwide. That exists. Democrat, Republican doesn't exist.
Now, how do...
So again, that's Billy Carson on Andrew Schultz's Flagrant podcast. So this is why this to me is the most positive news of the month, is that we're seeing all these conversations happen, and not even just conversations, but like spiritual influencers finally breaking into the mainstream.
Yep.
The fact that Andrew Schultz, who's probably the biggest, most well-known stand-up comedian with the biggest podcast of any stand-up comedian other than Joe Rogan, is having somebody like Billy Carson on his podcast, who, you know, he would have been maligned 5 years ago and was maligned 5 years ago for being a kooky, crazy, out there guy. You know, nobody wants to talk to a guy like that in the mainstream. These niches don't have any crossover 5 years ago. And just in 5 years, we're seeing this blending happening. And I've been predicting this, bro. And we said this a few episodes ago, that we're going to see this kind of thing start happening where spiritual influencers will start getting invited more and more on mainstream podcasts. And when I say mainstream, I'm talking about like the most well-known, the Patrick Bet-Davids, the Joe Rogans, the Tucker Carlsons, Russell Brand. The crossover has to happen at some point, right? And when we talk about culture war and cultural evolution, I really like to pay close attention to cultural shifts, because I think cultural shifts probably tell us the most about the evolution of consciousness in our society. And if you notice this, right, like again, these things happen so slowly in relative time that we can't really appreciate the magnitude of the shifts that are taking place in our lifetime. But, you know, when I was in high school, bro, like nobody was saying things like good energy, bad energy, good vibes, bad vibes. But now everybody, anywhere you turn, any mainstream podcast host, celebrities, everybody's using those terms now. And so that shows that there's an upgrade in consciousness, right? Where humanity in society is becoming more aware of things like energy, vibrations, you know, these very esoteric concepts that used to be maligned as woo-woo stuff are now common vernacular in the culture. And so that's a really huge sign. Like we can't overstate what a huge sign that is for humanity's evolution right now, that Billy Carson is clearly somebody that Andrew Schultz actually listens to on his own downtime, right? He found this guy interesting enough to say, hey, I'm going to bring this guy on my podcast. And he tries to stay neutral and like, you know, we're not going to fact check you. Just take us deep, Billy. And dude, I don't know if you watched that podcast, but they went into every crazy topic you can think of in terms of Billy Carson's like wheelhouse on forbidden knowledge, you know, the pyramids, ETs, Anunnaki. And Andrew is just like, tell me more, like super interested in these ideas that people would have been embarrassed to be associated with 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So, you know, that podcast plus Tucker's podcast with Rogan were like the highlights of the month for me in terms of positive news. Of the things I pay attention to is the way that cultural language is shifting, the way that these niches are beginning to cross-pollinate with each other. And it's like that cross-pollination has just begun. We're going to see a lot more of it happening. Even in May, actually, I was on Digital Social Hour in Las Vegas. And he's had, you know, Matthias De Stefano and Blue of Earth and a lot of other spiritual influencers on there, because this guy, he's a mainstream podcast host, but I got to talk to him. His name is Sean Mike Kelly. Off mic, we were talking and he was explaining to me how he's had this big spiritual awakening in the last 2 years. He's getting into meditation and learning about astrology and stuff. And I'm just smiling like, wow, like this is something I didn't expect to see happen this dramatically, this quickly. And so when you extrapolate things out another 5 or 10 years, if this is already starting to happen, you know, where are we going to be 10 years from now? It's just a really positive sign for where we're heading, I think.
Damn. Yeah. It's funny, man. We're secretly consuming all of the same media. And I watched both of those podcasts.
Nice.
The Billy Carson one, I didn't get all the way through. I think it was like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something, right?
It was almost 3 hours.
Yeah, so I got like 2 hours in. So I actually didn't see the little part that you played. That must have been towards the end.
Yeah, it was.
Amazing. But yeah, I listened to all the stuff about the Anunnaki and everything like that he was breaking down. And I was actually going to send you that clip because certain things that he was saying, I felt like I would have loved your take on.
A lot of good stuff in there, man. Did you listen to the part about Moses being Akhenaten?
Yeah.
And the pyramids with the Holy Ark of the Covenant being the power center of the pyramids and stuff.
Yes.
Fascinating conversation.
Yeah, but he was also breaking down how like a lot of the parts of the Bible aren't actually, correct, blah, blah, blah. So those were specific things that I was curious your take on. And I know you know a lot more than me about that stuff. So yeah, general thoughts, like I think you nailed it. We've talked about it recurringly in different episodes where it's like, it's kind of hard to gauge if you're not very, very introspective and have the ability to really zoom out and remember what life was like years ago. But,
yeah,
Tucker Carlson was always known for being a Fox News groupie who would just kind of, parrot right-wing slogans and you know what I mean?
Talking points.
And watching his journey of getting fired by Rupert Murdoch or whatever, right? And then trying to figure out where he's going to go, and PBD offers him $100 million and he declines, and then he lands on X, and then now you see him and Elon kind of doing a thing, and he decided to go the independent route where he just publishes it to X and all that. But all of that was happening at the same time. I think that was a big catalyst for his awakening, because I think he started to have some of those moments where he just naturally questioned some things that he didn't think was that big of a deal. And then he saw what happened to him in that instance. So I definitely agree with you, like the spiritual awakening in his path. And what's so beautiful about when people who have such massive influence go through a spiritual awakening, they're bringing tens, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people along for the ride. And that is incredibly impactful. So one thing the internet may not know about me, I love comedy.
Same.
I'm always joking around. When I'm not teaching on a serious topic, I like to joke around. I really appreciate comedy and just the art of it. And I think laughing is, a big part of the human experience.
It's good medicine.
So I've been into comedy for, well over a decade. And I also learn a lot from comedians. And one thing that I don't think a lot of the mainstream stops to notice or appreciate is that comedians are some of the most intelligent people in society. They're observing things that the rest of society has unconsciously noticed, but never consciously been able to put words to. And that gap is actually the art of what comedy is. They notice things that we've always unconsciously noticed, but never been able to formulate thoughts or words on. And then they stand on stage and articulate this experience that you've had. And you're like, oh my God, he nailed it. Yep. How did he say that so well? And everyone in the audience is erupting because they pulled on a thread, and that is their genius. And so the reason I lay that out is because I believe that gift, the same gift that allows them to pack out arenas, right? Like Andrew Schultz he's sold out Madison Square Garden. I don't know if you saw that cool video with his dad, but he's at the peak of his career, right? So he's selling out Madison Square Garden as if he's a rock star. And that same gift that allows him to be so brilliant with his comedy allows comedians to question societal norms and not fall into groupthink and look at things that have been happening in society that most of us stop questioning. We lose the ability to see outside of it because it's like, oh, well, that's just how things are. But comedians they take a step back because that's their art. That's how they figure out jokes. They try to step outside of norms, look at society from an objective, or almost like they're an alien from a different planet looking at the human race, and figure out like what parts of these norms are like quirky or weird, or like, could I pull a joke out of? And that makes them some of the best like critical thinkers and outside of the box thinkers. And so I say all that to say that, like, this is just a side take, but I feel like Andrew Schultz was well aware of most of the things that Billy Carson was saying, but he was pulling a Joe Rogan where he's like, when Joe would have Alex Jones on, because, whatever, And Joe's progressed a lot, but you know, there's a lot of those times where Alex Jones has like a temper tantrum and he's like, "Don't do this, Joe. You fucking know everything I'm saying." And then Joe's like, "I don't know what you're talking about, man." He's like, "You're smarter than me, Joe. You have articles on every single thing I'm saying." And it's like later comes out, it's like, yeah, he did know all that. But I feel like that's the gift of comedians. Like you look at people like Tim Dillon, Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, like these people know a lot of shit, and they get to write it off as, oh, I'm a stupid comedian. And I feel like they're some of the highest IQ people in society. They're high IQ and high EQ. So I know that's not like super directly related to what you're saying, but I think you nailed the more direct piece of why that's such amazing news. And my thoughts are just like, these people have massive platforms. They're both very clearly awake, Tucker and Andrew, but they do a great job of like they don't act in a way where they would be labeled as like,
they don't telegraph it too much.
Yeah, like they're not walking around with like mala beads and acting like Russell Brand, where the media can then just go, "Okay, stop listening to them." You know what I mean?
Giving themselves Hindu names.
Yeah, they flirt the line of like trendy, they fit into culture, but like in their own private life, like I would imagine these people have a real spiritual connection. And
I know for a fact they do, actually.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, Tucker's more obvious, but it's just like you can tell. Like Andrew, for example, like where he's at in his career, it would make all the sense in the world if he was of the world to be single, running through women right now, living a hedonistic lifestyle. And he's not. He got married. He surrounds himself with the same crew, and he put all of them on. And you can just tell that like he's not moving like how a lot of people who get fame are. Mm-hmm. And Tucker, same thing. Like Tucker's a very unique dude. Like he's worth racks. I don't think people are aware he's damn near 9-figure net worth, and he's just like gonna show up in his corny flannels that look like they're from Walmart, and he just doesn't. You know, he's just, you can tell
disheveled hair.
Yeah, he's just built different.
Yep. Well, that's why I pointed out when Schultz said humanity has to raise their consciousness. He kind of said that in response to something Billy said. I was like, what was that?
Yeah.
I kind of see culture like a pond with bubbles coming up, like or like a steaming bog or something. And you have these different niches in culture, right? Like the mainstream stand-up comedy scene that Rogan really pioneered and all the comedians he brings on. That's a huge bubble coming out of the pond, right? And over the last 10 years, especially 5, the spiritual influencers and teachers niche has started to bubble up. And you're going to get to a certain point where these bubbles are going to start to cross over each other, right? And the spiritual bubble has gotten to that size that it's crossing over into, and there's no surprise, right? No shock at all that it's crossing over first into the stand-up comedy world, where the Joe Rogans, the Schultz, the Tim Dillons, the Theo Vaughns are having these spiritual influencers and teachers on, not to make fun of them, but to get into their content and ask them more questions and learn and stuff. And I think it's the best possible combo, because what you mentioned about stand-up comics being some of the smartest people is absolutely true, because to be a good stand-up comic, you have to have a certain level of self-awareness where you can pick up the idiosyncrasies, the contradictions in human behavior and society and make jokes about it. And so not only do stand-up comics play a huge role in terms of standing in the gap of society, of all the things that you mentioned, of like poking fun at the new ideologies that the deep state is, trying to propagandize culture with, but they also give people permission to laugh at obvious contradictions. Like, dude, where would we have been during COVID if we didn't have all these really brave stand-up comedians being willing to go up on stage and make jokes about how the vaccine doesn't make sense?
Yep.
Stuff like that. And then people are like, like, I've been thinking that too, but too afraid to say it. Mm-hmm. Comedians give people that permission slip to laugh at what their subconscious knows is either wrong or illogical or irrational. So they push the needle forward in a huge way. And it really makes me think of this one line from A Course in Miracles, actually, where it says, "Into the mind of the Son of God, there crept a tiny mad idea." And that tiny mad idea is the belief in separation. And it says, "Where then the Son of God forgot to laugh." And the Course says, and that's where everything went wrong, when the Son of God forgot to laugh, because the tiny mad idea is that we're separate from each other and divided. And what does laughter do? It brings us together. Laughter can be a really powerful way to realize truth, actually. And we're starting to see not only comics breaking into the spiritual niche more, but we're seeing more conscious comics too.
Yep.
Like really funny stand-up comedians that are like very awake spiritually and don't do any vulgar jokes or jokes about like the degeneracy of society, drugs, sex, rock and roll, but they're actually making really great jokes about spiritual paradoxes. And I think of Pete Holmes, for example. So to close this up, I had an interesting experience a few weeks ago. My wife and I and a couple friends went to go see Shane Gillis here in Austin.
He's one of my
at
favorite.
the HEB Center.
I'm jealous.
And it was funny because I had the choice between Shane Gillis or Andrew Schultz. We were like, who do we want to get tickets to? And I was really leaning towards Schultz, but some of the other people wanted Gillis. So I was like, all right, that's fine. So we went to go see Shane Gillis. And like, I don't go to festivals, concerts. Like I never really get into mainstream society environments. So it'd been a while since I had tasted that energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we're standing in line outside the HEB Center and, hundreds of people in line and the energy is like so dense. And my wife and I are looking at each other like, man, you feel that? Like I haven't felt this in quite a while. And I think the last time I felt it, however many years ago, I wasn't as tuned in as I am now. So I wasn't able to appreciate how dense the energy is, but it's like, you could just feel it's like all of these, whether college age, to mid 40s kind of people on average who are working these 9-to-5 slave jobs, who can barely pay their rent. They're living in a tiny studio apartment. And this is like their one night out with the boys or the girls to have some fun before they go back to their slave job. And we're standing in line, man, and listening to the people right in front of us talking. And it's this group of guys. And this one guy goes, yeah, I got up at 4:30, popped an Adderall, had another Adderall at 7, had 4 shots of espresso at 9, and had to get through my work day. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, whoa, I forgot that most people kind of live like that. Just day to day, try to get through the day, live for the weekend type of lifestyle. And you could feel the heaviness people are carrying from that. And it provoked a lot of compassion, but we got inside the center and it's just wall to wall people. You can barely squeeze through as you're trying to find your seat. And, you're listening to people, you're feeling the energy, and it's like everyone's in this really dense matrix energy. And we get to the show and we're in like the 3rd or 4th row close to the stage. Tony Hinchcliffe gets up as a surprise opener for Gillis and just does the best 8 minutes of stand-up comedy I think I've ever seen. Just absolutely slaughters the stage. I was blown away at this guy's ability.
I haven't seen him live.
Yeah, I had actually never seen his stand-up before. I've only watched him on like Rogan or Kill Tony.
Yep.
But dude, his stand-up was on another level, and his ability to command the crowd was what I was really impressed with. And I had the thought, I'm like, man, if these guys could get into some conscious content and start awakening a bit, think about the influence they could have. Like, I'm in a stadium with 14,000 people screaming for these guys. Hinchcliffe gets on stage and it's like deafening roar. Shane Gillis walks up, deafening roar, and they're just commanding the crowd, eating out of their palm, And I'm like, stand-up comics have to be and are definitely going to be the forerunners of that merger of more spirituality into mainstream culture, where words like good vibes, good energy are now commonplace. We're going to see more of that start happening and bleeding into the culture. And I know for sure that comics are going to play a big part, if not the biggest part, in that cross-pollination.
100%. Yeah, I wasn't expecting this episode to go there, but I've definitely thought about this repeatedly. And I think what it is that, like, if we go back to past times where there was like a ruling class or like a king and a queen or whatever, right? Like a monarchy, you had like your jesters, right? Back then or whatever. And so it doesn't matter if we're talking about present day or back then when times were like that, or like you name the time period. Throughout history, like if you question the king, depending on the time we're talking about, you might be decapitated or hung in the town square or whatever, right?
Burned alive.
But the jester could make a joke as long as the king found it funny, right? So fast forward to today, it's like, depending what you do, they won't decapitate you, but they'll like financially try to hang you in the town square, right?
Or
they'll cut off
culturally.
your access to banks. They'll try to ruin your reputation, your ability to provide for your family. They'll try to kind of like, so it's a different
Censor
form,
you.
but very similar. But comedians can do that. Once again, they always have the protection of, I'm a comedian. And a lot of them are very good at like playing that part. Like even Rogan, like honestly, I feel like Rogan might be in the top. He's probably in the top 10% of IQ. I don't know that you could ever find him speaking on this because he probably wouldn't want people to know that. But comedians are, at least the ones that rise to the top, are like extremely high IQ. And yet they'll play that kind of dumb card very well. And I think that that's smart that they do because it allows them to keep their freedoms a little bit more. Versus someone like Alex Jones, you'll laugh your ass off when you listen to him talk, but he's not a comedian. And so the media and society takes what he's saying very differently versus, you know, a comedian can do a very similar thing, but be like, oh, I'm batshit crazy. And then like everyone just laughs. And it's like, but they're saying the same thing. And so what you're speaking to, I think, is super important. Like, you know, especially during a fourth turning and everything, there's definitely that aspect of like, comedians can say things that other people can't or are afraid to. And I agree with you. They're kind of like that front line. Like they kind of have to do it first or like realistically kind of start the wave. And then other people kind of go like, you know, what'd you think about that thing that he said? Or like, you know, like we should talk about this or whatever, like that type of thing.
Dude, have you seen Rogan's IQ test he did on his podcast a few years ago?
Oh, no. So he has done this.
Mm-hmm. He did one like for a podcast episode and he scored like 124 or something.
That's not very good, is it?
No, that's very good.
Is it?
Yeah.
What does it go up to?
I think average is like 95 to 100, most people.
Okay.
125 or somewhere around there is like very intelligent. And then I want to say genius begins at 150.
Okay.
Might be 160, but you know, he was talking about having Elon Musk on his podcast, and he's like, when I talk to Elon, I'm very aware of how stupid I am.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, but that's because you're smart, though.
Yeah.
An actually unintelligent person wouldn't be listening to Elon Musk thinking that they're unintelligent.
Yeah.
They'll be disagreeing with him, be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
No,
so what's your positive news, man?
All right, cool. So this is going to be a little different from what you shared. So I'll give it a preface first before I play it. So we've talked about this repeatedly, but with this show, one of the things that we really want to encourage you guys to do and also kind of lead the way in is no longer falling into this like good and bad duality lens through which you view reality and things that are happening, right? So like we've talked about everything from the Diddy stuff to child trafficking to, you know, economic stuff to whatever. And a lot of people can sit there and go, oh, this is heavy. This is bad. Like this is sad. But in reality, remember, this is all positive news. And so what I'm going to be playing is, well, I'm curious of your reaction on it, but I just wanted to preface with that and basically understanding that what this clip is speaking to is extremely positive, even if it doesn't seem like it on the first surface level observation. So I'll go ahead and share my screen.
For the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents were at 30. That is the social compact breaking down. People aged 30 to 34, 60% of them in 1990 had one child. Now it's 27%. People are opting out of America. They're not optimistic about it. They're not having kids. Young people aren't having sex. They're not meeting. They're not mating. The pool of emotionally and economically viable men shrinks every day, which lessens household formation. So we have a real issue. Young people are enraged. So it turns every cut, every movement into an opportunistic infection because, quite frankly, they are just pissed off. They look up, they see wealth, exceptional wealth across my generation and people in certain industries, and they are really struggling. Their purchasing power is going down, and the incumbents create artificial scarcity on campus. We take pride in rejecting 90% of our applicants, so the incumbents who already have a degree see their degree go up in value. We get very concerned with housing and traffic once we own a housing. Housing permits are sequestered from young people. Housing prices have gone from 290 to 420 in the last 4 years. So a young person, a house, stocks that I don't own skyrocket in value. Let's have COVID relief and flush the markets and take assets way up, because if 1 million people dying would be bad, would be tragic if I got less wealthy. And we're doing it on their credit card. Young people have every reason to be enraged, and every issue they see, they look up, they get angry, and they see someone doing better than them. And then every day it is speedballed in their face that they are failing, that they are not doing as well as everyone around them. We have lost the script. Our kids are more anxious and more depressed and more obese and more addicted. And we have made a purposeful decision to let this happen by ensuring the people around this table stay wealthy at the cost of young people.
Epic, dude. Epic rant. Wow.
Yeah.
Round of applause for that guy.
For sure.
He gets it.
Yeah, so a few things I like about that. Obviously, it sounds like he's talking about such horrible things going on, but in reality, if you can zoom out, like, number one, this is on the Morning Joe and like MSNBC regular news.
NPC news, dude.
Yep, exactly. NPC news. Number two, they didn't cut him off and let him speak. And then number three, the things that he's speaking on, like, you know, sure, there's problems going on and everything like that, but it's important that these things are able to be voiced. And I think he communicated that in an excellent manner. And then they just kind of cut the clip. I would have loved to see what the other guy followed up with.
Yeah.
But I think he nailed it. You know, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about of, like, you know, the fourth turning and systemic change and everything like that, summed up in 1 minute and 54 seconds. It's affecting everything from people wanting to reproduce. It's affecting people being able to own homes. It's affecting people's ability to accumulate any semblance of wealth. And this ties into, you know, a lot of what the show isn't directly financial, but I'll say a lot of what I do and my why is just like, we can no longer live under what worked the last 50 years, right?
Yep.
Like, you have to live by new rules. And if you don't, not going to be the best decade for you. But I look at news like this and it just reminds me of exactly where we're at. Curious your thoughts.
I find that very interesting that they're talking about how this generation, whether it's Gen Z or, you know, millennials, are getting disillusioned from the world they live in. And they're seeing the extreme corruption and brokenness of the financial system we have. And again, that looks bad on the relative level, but it's a very good thing long-term, because we need to get disillusioned from the system and break away from it. And look at what good fruit that's actually produced, right? This generation of young people, Gen Z, maybe millennials, kind of those two generations together, that's the generation or generations that have figured out that money's fake. It's all just credit, and you can learn how to discharge and all that stuff. It's this generation that's figuring that out because they got so disillusioned from the baby boomers generation of wealth accumulation. And, you know, in the baby boomers generation, the cutting edge secret information getting passed around was like tax loopholes and offshore bank accounts and ways to skirt around taxes and stuff. And so that's why that generation are the oligarchs of the world right now with their billions and billions of dollars. And so that has made young people very angry and upset, and this is unfair, this is unjust. And so what do? They turn to other forms of knowledge to make remedy, such as law and sovereignty, financial freedom, UCC, USC, all the stuff that you teach. We're seeing this massive wave of disillusioned Gen Z, millennial aged people coming to this knowledge and going full steam ahead, dude, just cracking the code, learning how to discharge, learning how to operate from trust. And that's going to have a massive effect once this generation is where the baby boomers are in their, 50s, 60s, 70s. If the system even lasts that long, of course, and I don't think it probably will. But this clip you chose actually goes really well in tandem with another reaction clip that I have later. So maybe we'll harken back to it in a few minutes.
Cool. You want to transition to reaction videos now?
Let's do it.
All right, guys. Moving on to our second segment, reaction videos. I'm going to hand it off to you, Aaron. What you got for us for your first video?
So both of these clips I have are very much just kind of like more positive news, but I do want to get your reaction to these. And the first one is, I'll preface it by saying that part of the Great Awakening that needs to happen is it's twofold, right? The old world, which is run by the negative polarity, needs to come into the light and be exposed, right? There needs to be a global awakening to the game that's being played, the corruption, the systemic abuse that's going on in these systems, so that the old world can collapse. And then in tandem with that, there needs to be the new world that is being built by the positive polarity on this planet, needs to be able to innovate and create new technologies and things that will replace the old system and make it obsolete. And as we know, since the days of Nikola Tesla and probably before that, free energy technologies and global healing technologies such as soil recomposition and medical technologies that could rid the world of disease, the whole terrain theory versus germ theory stuff, all of that has been so heavily suppressed for so long that these world-changing innovations and information can't get out to the public. And this clip here was really encouraging when I watched this segment of, this is Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock on Rogan. And he's going to be talking about here a free energy device that's already patented and is in process of being pushed out into the mainstream through Mazda, actually, for free energy, as well as just new ways for travel around the world through free energy that obviously would change the world overnight. So super exciting stuff. I'll play the clip here.
This is the work of Nikola Tesla. And he was, again, this is way too much for us to get in today. That's why we need to devote a whole session to talking about this.
Okay.
But this was the inspiration. His work was suppressed. A lot of his patents were taken, sealed up by the U.S. government for whatever reason. I don't know. But this is some of the stuff that's now being developed using his ideas, plus some of the others. This is the man I've been talking to for the last 7 years.
Malcolm Bendall?
Yes. And again, I don't want to get into it today, but here's an example of what they're doing. This is a generator that has no moving parts. It's all based on geometry, pure geometry. And here's the basic idea, as I think I understand it at this point. Resonance frequencies. Everything vibrates. Have you ever, if we had an electric razor, we plugged it in, turned it on, set it on this table, it's going to move around, isn't it? You ever seen that?
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the concept, because it's vibrating. Everything vibrates at a frequency, and if you know that frequency, you can control things. And I think that's the basic idea of what we're looking at here. And it's all based upon the ancient numbers. And they're developing technologies right now, and they have been. I was recently contacted and given the go-ahead that I could talk. I've been sitting on this for 7 years without talking about it because they asked me not to talk about it until they had their patents in place and their licensing. That's all happened since last summer. So we're now free to talk about it. So that's what I'm saying. I think it would be a good idea to get me back on here. We can look at it. I'm going to lay this on Graham so he can look at it too, because I really want to get Graham's feedback on this.
I mean, would it be fair to say that there's an element of a rediscovery of a lost technology from the past?
I think it would be fair to say that, yes.
Yeah. And so through this technology, they're able to move stones or cut stones or all the above?
All the above.
And even transport them? Whoa,
Yes.
what is all this?
Well, this is the model, and this is diagramming all the frequencies of the elements and what their
That
vibrational
looks like David
frequencies
Hawkins levels
are,
of
and the numbers
consciousness.
that measure.
Exactly, bro. So this is what he's saying here is this is the frequency of every element in the periodic table.
Damn.
So they're merging these quote unquote different sciences. This has been a big problem of mainstream science, right? Is it's all compartmentalized so that these different disciplines like sacred geometry, mathematics, frequencies, chemistry, they're all separated from each other. And you can't understand the universe from separation consciousness. You have to merge these things together and understand that frequency is geometry, is mathematics, is music, is chemistry. It's all the same thing at different densities of expression, right? And that's where we're going to figure out real technology when we crack that code, which is what he's doing here.
Yeah.
Measure those frequencies, and they're all the numbers we get from looking at these ancient traditions that recur over and over and over again, that I've been talking about in my sacred geometry classes for decades without knowing what the final result was going to be. So this inventor who's working with this small group contacted me, and this is what he told me. He said, you built the foundation. He said, you laid the foundation with your work on ancient geometry, and I built a house on top of it. That's what he said.
Nice.
So for 7 years, he's been supplying me with all the information. I have copies of all the patents. I have videos of the testing of the prototypes. And Mazda, the car manufacturer in Japan, is getting ready to do a $25 million testing of some of these prototypes that they believe they can retrofit internal combustion engines with. And there's over 100, they've developed over 100 patents on some of this stuff. And it's amazing.
And what would be the fuel?
Well, plasmoids. Plasmoids, as it says here, are donut or toroidal-shaped clusters of net protons or net electrons that once captured and placed into a toroidal orbit are capable of absorbing, storing, and releasing enormous amounts of energy within their self-generated and structured electromagnetic containment field. Plasmoids, in effect, function as an atomic battery that can be self-charging due to its ability to convert matter to available clean energy. So it's a lot to get into, and I think it would take us kind of off what we're here to talk about today.
At least what's promising is that there is some, at least, research or understanding.
And it's actually quite mature at this point. And in order to avoid the kinds of fate that befell Tesla and Reich, Robert Oppenheimer, Victor Schauberger, and so many others that were working in these fields, all kind of converging on this same insight. It's been conducted in secret. The laboratory that they've been developing this is in the Maldives, so that it's been immune from government interference. And now I think it's about ready to go the next.
Now, what is the motivation of this?
I just had a thought.
What do you think?
I haven't looked at it this way before, but like, you know how there's a lot of this, I mean, Tesla's so popular of an example, but there's been repeated suppression of anyone who either tried to or did solve these types of metaphysical problems, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where they're acting outside of what we've been taught are the laws of physics, basically, right? And so the download that I just had as I was listening to that is like, at the most zoomed out macro level, like more than anything else, I think the reason they continue to do this and refuse to let this come out is because you can't have this technology show validity to the society and also not have the conversation of metaphysics and God and you know what I'm saying?
Energy.
Like you can't, those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can't separate them. So like when he's like casually like, yeah, so what runs this? And he's like, well, the toroidal field. And
the
it's like,
toroidal field of the plasmoid neutrons.
Yeah. So it's like, did you hear what you just said? So like people won't be able to, like, you can no longer laugh at like energy and like vibration and like levels of consciousness, which all come from source. And like, you would have to have all of those conversations if you were to just let there be a single car or a single use case that was like actually put out to the marketplace where that was how it was operating. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I totally agree, man. And the other big part is just the corporations aspect, right? That think about all the energy companies.
Right, the money aspect.
The energy sector is like the biggest in the world, if you include oil in that.
Yeah.
And if you have free energy, like you can't have free energy in a debt slave world.
Yeah.
Because then it's no longer a slave world. It's a free world, right? Free energy is the number one thing that they need to keep the lid on if they want to keep their tiny grip of control they have left over the planet.
Yeah.
You know, I remember watching a documentary like 10 years ago. I don't remember what it was called, but it was a documentary about free energy innovations and all the suppression. And they literally had a camera crew following this guy who invented a device that I want to say it pulled like hydrogen out of the atmosphere. And then through the electrical currents and the hydrogen produced free energy infinitely. So you just need this device to just sit outside and just pull in hydrogen from the ether, and it can just create energy forever. And they power their whole house on it. And he's explaining the technology in the beginning of the documentary. And then about a third of the way through, these FBI agents come to their house. Like, excuse me, sir, we hear that you have forbidden technology that's, against the codes of this and that, FDA, whatever. And he's like, oh no, this is just my private experimentation. It's not in the public. I'm not selling it. They're like, well, we're going to need to confiscate that for research purposes. And he's like, no, I don't give you permission to do that. And so then they leave. And then, like, I think it was the next day, the camera crew wakes up. He's in a panic. They're getting in the car, driving out to the site, and his entire home was burned to ashes. And there's still like things on fire, up in flames. And they just came and burnt his whole house down overnight and destroyed his research.
Holy
and so what
shit.
that tells me is they are terrified of this technology getting out. And so that's why this is such a huge piece of positive news, right? That Mazda has now patented this and is ready to move it into production, because this is why they won't be able to keep the lid on this forever, especially now that the collective consciousness is waking up and we're more connected through the internet and things, is that somebody's going to figure out you can make a lot of money using this technology. And when that money is used for good rather than evil, it will begin to overtake the ways it's been weaponized in the past for suppression, right? So the oil industry, the gas industry, energy sector, these sectors of society don't want this technology to get out. So it may not even necessarily just be government, although I think it is government to a large extent. Governments don't want this out either. But it's the fact that somebody's going to patent a technology sooner or later that, I mean, there's infinite ways to create free energy devices. I've seen in that documentary alone, there was like 5 different free energy devices, all worked differently. One of them used water to create free energy. One of them used the soil to create free energy. And all of these technologies were getting suppressed throughout the documentary. It goes to show you that we do live in an infinitely abundant universe. And this is one of the best kept secrets of our current society that would liberate humanity overnight if people understood the implications. Because it's like, look, I'm in a room right now. I'm paying money for those lights to be on. And it's just light. It's just electricity. Like, there's literally nothing more free than energy. I think in a cubic centimeter of space, there's like enough energy to equal like 10 nuclear bombs or something. There's an insane amount of energy everywhere you look, bro. And we just haven't figured out how to harness it, because those who have figured it out, like Tesla, they get suppressed, and the knowledge is always kept secret and kept into the hands of those with power and wealth. So that is perhaps the most important thing for humanity's awakening, is to get free energy technology out to the world slowly but surely. And I've been waiting for this day, man, to see some kind of big corporation starting to move that direction. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens, of course. There's going to be lawsuits, and everybody and their mom will try to sue Mazda and say, you can't have that technology for this and that reason. So we'll see how the courts handle that if and when that happens. But what a huge net positive for humanity that, number one, on Joe Rogan, you have all these huge figures like Graham Hancock, Rogan, Randall Carlson talking about this on a podcast that gets 20 million views a day. So now people understand, no, this is absolutely real, you guys. We shouldn't be paying mega corporations money for electricity, which is everywhere all the time for free infinitely. It's a Ponzi scheme, right? We've woken up in it. We were born into it, so we don't question it. But that's what awakening is, right? It's looking at the things you didn't question and beginning to question them.
Yeah, I got multiple things to say to that. So, number one, I want to get your thoughts on this. So, as you're talking, what popped in my head is, you're familiar with the framework of like, strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and then it repeats, right?
Bad times create strong men.
And then so that's kind of one way to look at demographics as they pertain to societies or economics and stuff like that. So we're obviously right now in the weak men created bad times. And so like now we're the strong men, like literally me and you, Aaron, helping create good times, right? And that's what the first turning will be for like our children, if you will.
Right.
And so there's kind of this notion of, because this gets into the realm of stuff that I study, right? Because this type of stuff is very important for financial markets. And it's not really a theory, but one lens you can look through is kind of this notion of like, sure, you can look at it as what I just laid out, or like the fourth turning framework of how these things go. But you can also, some people just have the perspective of, well, if you think about like, just pick any of these families, like the Rothschilds or whatever, right? So you had like, I think Baron Rothschild was one of the first ones or whatever. That original OG was a different breed. And then they end up dying. And of course, they've set up this elaborate estate and trust webs, and they've usually have massive families, and they really train and educate and empower the family to take over. But now we get into this conversation of trust fund babies. They've done a lot of studies on this. Families usually go from generational wealth to middle class in 3 generations.
Wow,
that's the average.
Way.
There's a phrase for it because it's so common. Like, started from the bottom, got here, went back to the bottom. Because like you're not the one.
Top, now we here.
Yeah, so like I'm laying now 2 frameworks that are synergistic, right? So because if you think about it, like one strong man who was birthed and raised in really hard times became that dude,
super motivated,
and changed the lineage. But then he had kids that were born into unprecedented abundance, and they could never become that because they weren't put in that same soil. And so I'm laying that as the foundation of what are your thoughts on like this notion of, as we're talking about the free energy conversation, because I'm thinking like, okay, so here's how you enslave a planet. You charge them for their water, for their food, and for their electricity, for their shelter. Yeah. So like they have the macro bases covered. Now everyone has to work. They have to trade their time, their labor and all that. And that's the system.
To buy free stuff.
That's the system. But it's like the people that have been doing this, right? When you talk about like one company just has to like push through and then like can cause a real ripple effect. But like when you think about the people that have been doing this, do you think there's any validity to the notion of like, well, you can almost just like wait for enough of them to die off? Because like a lot of this stuff was set up in that, we'll say 1910 to 1940, even 45 was the golden decades of like enslavement. We had everything from the Fed to Social Security to the modern education system to the modern medical system to then we had the multiple different wars, and we had the U.S. coming into the world reserve power, Bretton Woods Agreement, U.S. coming off the gold standard. I mean, you had a crazy few decades, and that was where everything is like cemented in. And so it's like, it just makes me wonder how long can this stuff last? And is there any validity to like people dying off? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's some truth to it for sure. But if we look at like who was in power in Nikola Tesla's day, what was that, 40s and 50s? Whoever was suppressing the free energy devices I just mentioned from that 2010 documentary are like the kids of that person.
Yeah.
And they were clearly, these families, the bloodlines, let's call them, they're clearly still in the game like their parents were. Yeah. And we look at which Rockefeller started the education industry. Not the same one that's running it now, but we see that the same top-down regime is still running the education system, making it a propaganda school network where you're not taught anything of value and you're just basically taught whatever ideology you want, right? So they clearly do pass down these tactics to their children, at least the very top families that, Billy Carson mentioned. Mm-hmm. I think the difference is that, well, number one, I don't think humanity can afford to wait another generation to see if, they're slipping, right? I think it's a bit different at that level when you're like, not just wealthy or something, but you're running the planet in that sense of you've controlled industries, medical, education, Hollywood, media. You're actually controlling entire industries. So I think that the kids that are being raised in those families that control those industries are like groomed like prodigies from birth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stories about people who grew up with them, friends of them, who have talked about this on different documentaries of like, they're in a kind of military school in their own house, learning how to operate money, trusts from a young age, and how society works, how systems work. So I don't think that at that level, that idea probably holds as true as, a middle America family who, some guy grows up in a lower income family, makes a couple $1 million, his kids get a comfortable life, and then they kind of drop the ball. That happens all the time for sure.
Yeah.
But with these kind of like extremely important innovations that have massive implications for these families and these bloodlines, I think that they treat it like a full-time job to make sure they don't do exactly what you're saying, that they don't let that happen to their kids.
Yeah.
So like at some point, a mega corporation that sees, like, the universe will use the greed for good, right? There's the Bible verse that says, what the enemy intends for evil, the Lord will use for good. So the same way that the enemy, the negative polarity, has used money for weaponization and control, God will eventually use that same principle of, hey, these people want to make money, and it just so happens you can make a lot of money on free energy. Oh, who knew? And they're going to want to be first to market with that. And it's a whole lot more difficult to suppress a mega corporation like a Mazda than some guy in Wyoming inventing free energy in the mountains.
Yeah. So I guess to clarify, because you're right, I agree with what you're saying. My question, or like my thought process, is more around like, you can't recreate the drive that the initial person or people had to go through the difficulty of creating, whether we're talking about being the first one to create generational wealth or being so driven and motivated to create these systems that literally enslave humanity for 100 years. Like that's next level.
Yeah.
Their kids will never know that drive. And so they can be groomed all they want. They can have all the tactics, the strategies, but their soul, that they're not, if we can even think of it like a soul contract, even though they're enslaving humanity. The person who came up with the system, their soul contract for whatever reason was to do that. Their kids, it's not the same. They're being like forced into it, if you will. Not that they don't love it. Like, I'm sure they're like all this money and power, but that was kind of what I was speaking to, because from one lens, it's like, you're right. They're at a very high level running a tight ship that's like maintained across a century. Like, that's insane. They obviously have a next level systems, processes, checks and balances, but at the same time, look at the systems. They're not gaining control, which you would think would happen because you get more economies of scale over time. You acquire more knowledge, resources, people, you get better, you make less mistakes, but that we're not seeing that. We're seeing a crumbling.
You're right.
And so that was more so my thoughts of just like, when you're the great grandson of the OG enslaver,
David Rockefeller,
you're just not built like that. You don't, like, even your dad and his dad are trust fund babies. You get what I'm saying? It's just, you don't have that same, you're just like, oh, this is going to last. You could almost have a mentality, when I put myself in their shoes, of like, this is going to last forever. Like, we're the elites.
Right.
They're down there. Like, we don't have anything to worry about. This is going to last forever. Look how insane our checks and balances are. No one's catching on. Like,
they get comfortable.
Yeah. Versus the OG guy, the reason he created that was because he was driven by so much fear and like hypervigilance and like power dynamics and all of that. That I just don't think that those conditions get recreated once the abundance is there, or once the system is set up and they're in power. And you start seeing them get sloppy. Even like, look at our politics now. Like, they're so obvious.
So
they're being so obvious with it. Like, bro, you see that guy's mask, like his neck mask, you could see it was a mask. One of these politicians, someone posted it. I posted it in the LUC actually. But I forget his name because I don't really care. But you've heard these theories, right? That they're wearing masks.
Oh, yes.
Homeboy's neck fake skin was sticking out of his suit right here. And he was speaking on TV. He's a Republican senator or something. You could legit tell this was not like whoever you were seeing, that wasn't him.
If you want to pull that up actually on the show, that'd be interesting to look at.
All right.
But I want to respond to that because I agree with you, dude.
Let me try to find it.
The nuance I'm trying to point out is that I think this is why it's different with the bloodlines, because we've all known of the stories of the athlete's son who grows up idolizing his father for playing in the pros. And this kid wants to be like his dad. And so, Deion Sanders kids or something. And so they train their whole life because they idolize their father and they want to pick up where he left off and make their dad proud. I think that principle holds especially true for these bloodlines, because again, the whole point of their bloodline is that they believe they're special. They believe that their DNA, their blood, has some kind of extra power in it that makes them be able to do the things they do. And so I think in those specific, very rare environments, those kids do probably grow up with a ton of motivation to want to fill their dad's shoes in the right way that continues the bloodline. But then the caveat is, I agree with what you're saying, that it's still not possible to replicate the organic motivation that the original David Rockefeller had, coming from nothing into billions, right? It is very difficult, if not impossible, to have that same drive. And so I think what happens is a bit of both. I think that these families do have a lot of motivation to continue the bloodline, make their lineage proud, carry on the plans their father set for them to do, but they do get comfortable. And we see that happening all through society and all these systems that are crumbling. It's like they get lazy because they get complacent, thinking, we own it. We own everything. We're good. We've got it on lockdown. And I think they lose the ability to appreciate the shifting sands of culture and society and the awakening that happens where people know these families now. They're not secret anymore. No. And they talk about them very openly. Soros, Rockefeller, Rothschilds, Carnegies, Morgans. They're not in the dark anymore, hiding behind their little castles, plotting to take over the world. And so that puts a lot of extra pressure on these grandkids, great-grandkids, trying to carry on the power and tyranny their great-grandfather created for their bloodline. And so that's where we see a lot of the systems crumbling today. So I think like both are kind of true at the same time, but I do understand what you're saying and agree to a large extent.
Yeah, I've never talked to that out before, so I just wanted to kind of talk that out.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think it would be it's like one of those things of like, it's not a right or wrong, right? It's just looking at things from different perspectives. But
yeah, there's a lot of things
I can imagine being born, imagine being like a great grandkid and you're just like, God, you guys are so strict around here. Like grandpa was such a what's the word, like high strung or whatever
all the time.
Yeah, like chill out, no one's gonna find out, like it's not a big deal. And then that's when they make a mistake or whatever, and it's like it's just human nature. Like you can't.
I'm always surprised that we don't see more people in these families that like one kid, at least one kid that has some crazy spiritual awakening.
I know.
From all the heaviness and the darkness they grew up around, like watching these Masonic rituals in their homes. I don't know of any that have come out and talked about it. Maybe they do, and they're just like, well, I can't.
They probably
come out and
stuff
talk about it.
Don't you think they do stuff to them in their upbringing and stuff to keep them in a certain, lower energetic state, so that they can't really,
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Like biologically, emotionally, spiritually, like there's probably a lot going on to keep them in a certain range.
You got to keep them in the same thought system.
Yeah,
for sure.
All right, so I'll quickly pull that up so you can see what I'm talking about. So Alex Jones posted it, and it's Mike Pompeo, but like, let's zoom in. Look at that, dude.
Dude, what is
and it tries to fact check it, saying it just reveals saggy skin. That's not saggy skin. What's that hole?
It's a legit hole.
Yeah.
You just want to peel it back and see what's underneath there.
Yeah, it's like he forgot to adjust his human face mask before the interview. An honest mistake.
So I try to think about like, okay, what if it's not lizards? What if it's like, the same people that I'm sure if they've suppressed all these technologies, they've probably figured out different ways to extend the human lifespan well beyond the expected lifespan. So maybe you have these like 180-year-old people that still want to be running the show. And so they have to pretend that they died and dress up like other people. Like maybe that's what it is, but there's no doubt that that's not normal looking.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be an interesting.
What a crazy world, bro.
An interesting thing to find out one day.
Yes.
All right.
What do you got?
My turn. Let's, I'm definitely very interested to hear your thoughts on this.
We're going to shift gears here for sure. Wow, this is interesting. What?
Did you see this, bro?
Yo.
We're about to get biblical. I want to play that one more time.
Revelation 15, anyone?
And just so you know, so this was one of the king's horses. This wasn't just a random horse. Whoa. When they do their little shows. So now we're gonna go to Revelation, which you just mentioned.
6, not 15.
Right here. And
looked, hell followed him.
And behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth.
Fourth turning, anyone?
Yeah.
Fourth part of the earth? That's interesting.
I know. There was one other one that I can pull up to give you a little bit more context.
So do we know why they had blood on them?
I mean, so there's like news articles about it, but the thing about it is, let me show you.
Let me guess. They're like, oh, your lying eyes were deceiving you.
They're
just
saying
red
it's
paint.
the horse, like that the horse is bleeding.
Ah.
All right, so.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Kingsguard's channel fan account. Now, I've just seen something super.
So this is supposedly the horse caught earlier that day. So just so you can understand. So they were doing like rituals, basically. Like, I don't know. I haven't really been to these areas to know, but apparently this is normal. They ride around and stuff.
Whatever British oligarchs do.
In the middle of the Mall in central London. This is incredible. Now, from what I can see, this is the Blues and Royals regiment carrying the colour. Now, this is super rare. You don't often see this at all. Just popped out of nowhere. So I wonder what's going on.
So like,
this is incredible.
People who live in London and England seem to understand this better.
Yeah,
but
they know
basically like he's carrying certain colors and that's symbolic. And like the people that live there were like, what the hell is this? He's not supposed to be carrying that color, is my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And so
Wish
like
you would
all
say
the
more about it.
All the comments are talking about like the four horsemen and stuff like that, like from the Bible. And so here's that clip. Like you see it later that day, the horse is just gone with blood all over him.
Oh, trooper's been thrown. Oh, good Lord. Good heavens, what is going on with the horses today? Look at that horse going back over without the trooper. Look at this.
Is that guy
He
dead?
threw the trooper off him.
That's enough of, we don't need that to include that. Police are coming out to check on the trooper.
Yeah, so just thought that was interesting. There's been a lot of theories on Twitter. I'll just say that. Some people are speculating that there's been like a sacrifice in the royal family. Some people are speculating that, and like that it's going to come out soon. Some people are speculating that it's more of a sign of, like Revelation and either end times or however you interpret that, end times of the system. Well, I think it's like end times of what, right? Like, yeah. Is it anyway?
Yeah.
I know you come from a background of theology, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that Revelation as it pertains to that.
Yeah. We know Revelation was my first awakening out of religion, was that I started to realize this rapture narrative was not true. And in fact, everything that, there's the Matthew 24 where Jesus prophesies the destruction of the temple. And I actually did a real reaction clip for my Instagram a couple days ago that'll come out in a few weeks of a, evangelical Christian being like, in Matthew 24, Jesus says, I'm coming back and I'm going to return from the skies. And he's like quoting stuff that Jesus absolutely never says at all in Matthew 24. It's like they've gotten so used to projecting their belief system onto the Bible that they forgot what it actually says, kind of.
Right.
And when I read it, I'm like, oh, he's clearly prophesying and warning the Jews that are actually listening to him. Like he's not warning Christians 2,000 years in the future about a rapture event. He's talking to the actual first century Jews that were listening to him when he says, beware when you see these signs coming that the end of the age is near, because he understood that Rome and the Jews there was a fever pitch happening between them. There was all these battles and skirmishes where the zealots were, they would go into the deserts and they would sort of like surprise attack Roman armies traveling to and from and kill Roman armies. And they were trying to overthrow Rome. That's what they wanted to do. And so they were pissing off the Roman officials by doing this. And especially the Essenes, more than anybody, they were very apocalyptic in the sense that they knew the end of the age was coming. And so they were prophesying it, saying it's very near that the age of darkness is coming to a conclusion. And they believed that the Jews, through their animal sacrifices and their many deviations from the law, were going to be a part of that ending of the age because they karmically had earned it through their sins. So that's why the Essenes really sequestered themselves into the Qumran desert near the Dead Sea, to get away from Jerusalem and the coming apocalypse that was happening. And so Jesus is warning the Jews like, hey, if you're pregnant and nursing in those days, get out of the city. It's going to be the worst on you for sure. When you hear wars and rumors of wars, get out of the city. Because he knew that you can't poke a bear like the Roman army in the first century and expect that bear's not going to come bite you. And the Jews were poking that bear, dude. Like when you read the history, you're like, these people really thought that they were God's chosen people who could overthrow a military superpower, the likes of which Earth had never seen before. And they were a minuscule ant in comparison of military power. And they were just constantly poking the bear, bro. So Jesus was, like we are today, those of us listening, very awake to the social climate of his day and the political tensions of his day. And that's why he was constantly warning people about the coming doom and saying, hey, y'all don't want to be here when this happens. He said it's going to be something like the greatest disaster humanity has ever seen or ever will see. The greatest suffering humanity's ever seen. And he was right, bro, because in 70 AD, just like Jesus said, the full might of the Roman army comes to Jerusalem and sacks Jerusalem. I think it was like a 3-month battle. And man, the Jews put up an incredible fight if you read the history about it. But just as the negative polarity does, they just keep trying every possible strategy they can think of to get in there. And they finally break through and they slaughtered 1.1 million Jews in a single night.
Holy shit.
1.1 million Jews in a night. So it's like we've seen bigger genocides than that numerically speaking, but they take place over months and years. This is over 1 million people slaughtered in probably the course of like 12 hours. So just try to imagine what that would be like.
Imagine that. Yeah.
And it was the end of the age of the Jews cohabitating with Rome, right? They were annihilated and they had to run and flee to other areas of the world to live. So it's like, I read that, I'm like, oh, Jesus is just telling history. But an evangelical reads it and sees this totally bizarre idea of, oh, no, he was just talking to Christians who would live 2,000 years later about his return. He never mentions his return. He never mentions Christians or anyone from the future, but he for sure was talking about it. So like when I read the book of Revelations, I see the exact same thing. It's clearly a prophecy about the destruction of the temple and the annihilation of the Jews, the ending of the age. And it's just been totally warped and distorted over history. So like, I can't say much about the significance of the horses. Like I've watched some interesting videos on those topics, but my thought about the horses is more like, logic and reason would say that it's not the horse's blood on the horse, because that's a lot of blood.
I know. He wouldn't be like running like that.
He wouldn't be sprinting down the street that fast.
He'd be like spurting like a geyser.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely not the horse's blood, which means it's a human's blood, which means why is there a human's blood on the king's horses?
Yeah, well, if you look up, it's only like London or England articles you can find, right? Because that's where it occurred.
Yeah.
And every single one says that it's the horse's blood and it's going to need surgery. And it's like, this is not the horse's blood, bro.
Mm-mm. You know what's interesting about this though too, dude? Just one last thing I'll say is that karmically, this is what I think is going to keep happening, is that as humanity starts to say, we see you and no, we don't comply. We don't want what you want. We don't agree, right? The more humanity expresses its free will to say no to the controllers of our planet, karmically, it shifts the balance. And so we wonder, like, how can these secret societies and, Masonic lodges be covering up these kinds of blood sacrifices and dark black magic rituals they've been doing for so long? Because we know through people like Cat Williams and all kinds of Hollywood celebrities have come out saying like, yo, Hollywood's literally a Freemason cult, you guys, and you don't want any part of it because they're running the largest child trafficking ring in the world. They sacrifice children. We saw the Lady Gaga stuff. We've done episodes on that. Like, it's super, super dark. And you're like, how do they keep a lid on it? It's because karmically, the negative polarity knows how the game is played metaphysically. And they tell you subtly what they're doing and how they're going to do it ahead of time to get that tiny amount of karmic alleviation so they can keep what they're doing under the curtain. And now those things are becoming more well-known through people like Cat Williams and podcasts and the internet. People are waking up to the fact that the people at the highest levels of wealth and power are essentially Satanists for the most part, and they keep their power through black magic and things like this. And so now that there's a karmic shift happening, and I think, by the way, extraterrestrials are also waiting for this karmic shift to happen before they can interact more with humanity, is that they won't be able to keep a lid on this stuff. Accidents will happen, things will slip out, things will spill out, and they won't be able to keep a lid on it. And so like, maybe this is just the very beginning of that. But like, we've never seen one of the king's horses running around covered in blood before.
No.
So like, what's going on? Something very, very unusual is going on here. And maybe we'll find out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's exactly the direction I wanted to transition this to. So I'm with you in terms of Revelation. I didn't have that thorough background, so I appreciate you educating me and our audience on that. That's pretty dope history. But in general, you don't even need to understand that to understand the energetics of, like the people that are, you probably have better names for them, but very into the rapture and all that stuff. It just doesn't make sense. If you've had direct experiences with God, then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on in regards to this is like, so I agree with you about the rapture, and I agree with you about like, we have no idea, but it does seem weird what's going on. But as we know with these groups, whether we want to call them, if we want to talk about like Illuminati, Freemasons, different of these groups that run things, so they operate through symbols. A ritual is a form of symbol. Clothing or hand signals are forms of symbols. Colors are forms of symbols. Handshakes are forms of symbols. Words and sounds and letters. There's a lot of
compasses.
symbols. Yeah, there's a lot of symbols. So whether we're talking about visual, auditory, whatever, they're symbols, and that's part of what you're talking about with the karmic aspect, because they're like, well, we're showing you, like, it's right in your face. So that's why I wanted to bring up this clip. And also for you guys in the audience, like, let us know in the comments, for those of you who are just seeing this, or for those of you who have seen this, like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? Because this isn't one of those clips where I have it all figured out and here's what's going on. No, I'm just as fascinated as you guys. But my thoughts are, this seems awfully like one of those moments where they're like, we're showing you blatantly something very strange, like, let it run through the town square of London, like the king's horse. That's just like, that doesn't make sense, especially this year, with everything that's going on. So it's kind of like, we don't, or at least I don't personally at the moment know exactly what that is insinuating, but it seems awfully like some form of ritual and some form of them showing us things right in our face. But then again, if you don't study this stuff for a living, then it's like, you don't know what that means. So it is a strange thing. And it sounds like we're both in the same camp of like, we'll see what that means.
Something just popped into my mind that maybe this is the universe directing us in this area that may tie in. Did you see the guy who self-immolated outside of the Trump trial like a week or two ago?
What does that mean, self-immolated?
Set himself on fire.
Oh, shit.
You didn't see that?
That's a nice word for a brutal act. So I didn't see that, but I've heard people recurringly talk about it.
Yeah, it was a huge story.
Okay.
And so at first the media came out right away and they're like, it was a Trump supporter. He's upset about the trial and he burned himself alive. And then quickly the truth came out, as it always does. And it was actually, to me, it looked like it was a very disillusioned radical leftist who was like I want to say he was like a big Bernie guy back in the day. He was very much disillusioned from the left, but had come from the left because he wrote some manifestos. And in his manifestos, and this is what the news didn't report on, that, independent journalists like Russell Brand and Tim Pool did segments on it. His manifesto was saying, like, both wings of the bird are evil and corrupt, the left and the right. They're all working together. And I want to say he said in June, or around June 10th or something, there's going to be a worldwide sort of like fascist takeover. And he said America's going to play a big part in it, the American government, and then the British government as well. And then some others, maybe Russia, China, who knows. But like, these big world leaders are going to stage some kind of huge thing to create a fascist takeover. And maybe they'll do that through a World War III scenario, a cyber attack scenario, who knows? But that pinged into my mind when you showed me that clip a second ago, that if this was a demonstration, a karmic demonstration, which the negative polarity does very often, if it was intentional, I could see the symbology of like a horse, a steed is what carries the king who rules the land. And without the king, but only blood, would be like a foreshadowing of great war coming.
Yeah.
And it's coming from the king's horse, right?
Exactly.
In Revelation, it actually says, I call it Rambo Jesus, when it describes Jesus coming back on his white horse. And it actually says...
With the headband?
Yeah. With the Tommy gun, just like nuking people. In Revelation, bro, it says Jesus will come back. Think about this. The ultimate pacifist who taught, forgive your enemies, love your enemies, turn the other cheek, forgive them 70 times 7, do no harm. Revelation says he's going to return, that same Jesus, on a white horse with a sword, and his horse and his robe will be stained with the blood of his enemies that he's been hacking apart. He's going to come and hack apart all the non-Christians, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the most insane possible picture you can imagine. But, that's the picture, right? Is like the king's horse having blood on it means the king's been hacking people type of thing. So maybe that's what they were, because they're not going to have a horse with blood with the king on it or a nobleman on it. They're going to send the horse out to it's a metaphysical picture of, or foreshadowing of something that maybe they're planning. And these are the ways they tell you, right? They don't make it obvious, but the universe does speak through symbolism subconsciously.
Yep.
And so there is some karmic, are you paying attention? Are you watching these weird events? And the universe doesn't care if you're aware of it or not. It is true, right? Someone is trying to tell you something. So if you're not aware of it, or you see it and you gaslight yourself and say, well, it sounds like conspiracy theory, I'm not going to look into it, that's for crazy people. The universe says, okay, you're karmically involved then, because it was somebody trying to foreshadow something. So awareness is everything for the universe. And the more people that watch that stuff and go, wait a minute, that's fishy, let's look into that. Those kinds of things are what shift the karmic balance. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So we do have to pay attention to these things.
Yeah. All right, brother. You're up for our next reaction clip.
All right. I got a good one here. This is also a 2-part clip.
Remember when they called us conspiracy theorists for talking about how governments and NGOs carrying out cloud seeding programs, or how people have seen an...
I love how they have the national debt in the background.
I know, right?
Conspiracy theorists. Well, we were all proven correct once again. The city of Dubai in the United Arab Emirates is flooding. More than 6 inches of rain falling in a matter.
Did you see these floods, bro?
I did.
This is thanks to their cloud seeding program. So look at this. This is unbelievable. They are not used to this. 6 inches in just a few short...
What happens when you mess with nature?
Inches per year. So in one 24-hour period, actually, I think it was 48, they got 2 years worth of rain.
All right, look at that mall. We were just there.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Look at that.
And, they don't have the infrastructure for drainage. So that's why their highways are stuck. They're flooding all over the place. It's wild there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I lived in Arizona when I was 20, and we had a rainstorm one day, and it's one night, and because it's not built for it, it just flooded everything. It was crazy. I couldn't imagine getting that much rain. That's insane.
And the cloud seeding program that they've got, so this is legit. This is not a conspiracy theory. Oh no, they're not seeding clouds. There's nothing about chemtrails. Now, there are two different things. Seeding clouds and chemtrails, two different things. One is purportedly supposed to be good, right? The idea that we're going to have rain. The other one is supposed to be bad. It's supposed to stop rain. It's supposed to stop it, right? That's chemtrails and cause all sorts of sickness for people, and really, really awful. But here is just an insight into UAE's cloud seeding program. Yes, this is real.
Just so I know, I have to drive back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai.
No.
It's not raining. It's a sunny day. The UAE government invested more than $20 million in research to start a process called cloud seeding. The UAE performs around 1,000 hours of cloud seeding a year, and it's all controlled by this building in the National Center of Meteorology in Abu Dhabi, where they track the whole process. We met with a cloud seeding expert to explain how the seeding process works.
We wait the forecast. When we have a good, chance for a cloud, we send the aircraft to that location.
Oh my God.
Cloud. In the first stage of the cloud, there is good updraft at that time, start to release all the salt, and with the good updraft,
sounds like a great idea.
This is insane.
It will become bigger and start to rain.
The center manufactures a salt substance that helps enhance rainfall. They put them in what they call flares.
It's like the earth doesn't know when it should rain. We know when it should rain.
Yeah.
The arrogance, dude, is amazing.
I can totally put myself in like what they're thinking though, for sure. Like it's, they're just thinking from a perspective of like, we need to grow Dubai and like, it's extremely hot here, blistering. And it would be a lot more habitable if we could cool it off more often. And that would be an economically wise decision. But what's lacking is the understanding of nature and God and the universe and our place in that.
Yeah, so let's rape nature and mess with the natural balance of things to make it do what we want it to do. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
But you can blame that. And so there, I saw some people online like, come on, you right-wing nut jobs out there. This is not cloud seeding. This is clearly climate change. And then the UAE fires back and actually says, no, yeah, we were cloud seeding. In fact, we confirmed it. The Gulf States National Center of Meteorology dispatched seeding planes from Al Ain Airport Monday and Tuesday to take advantage of the cloud formations. The seeding planes have flown 7 missions over the past 2 days. So yes, this was directly responsible for all of this. Of course, this isn't the first time, by the way.
So they did 7 cloud seeding missions.
In 2 days.
In 2 days. And it said below that, over any cloud that looked
fertile.
Yeah, like any cloud that looked available, we see it, you know. And then they got this unprecedented flooding of 2 years of flooding in a day. 2 years worth of rainfall in a day. Yeah. And there were some deaths from what I remember seeing on the news. There was a couple deaths from those floods as well. So this is where we get into the climate change thing, right? Remember how I mentioned earlier that 2 things need to happen for the new Earth to take foothold on this planet. The negative polarity old world stuff has to get exposed and we have to become aware of it. Just like with our own shadows, we got to see the darkness in us, become aware of, oh wow, I have this trauma that's been buried inside of me since childhood that has been driving my behaviors. I got to meet that. I got to forgive that and bring it into the light. That's the first part of healing. And then you reach for those divine qualities that have been suppressed under that shadow and you activate them, you move towards them, you bring them to life, right? We talked about bringing the free energy technology into the new world, which is one part of it. Now, this climate change agenda has been a huge part of the negative polarities control agenda for the planet is to, again, it's always the same method, right? Problem, reaction, solution. Oh no, the planet's warming. It's terrible. Carbon's doing it. Carbon's bad. Give us your vote for us to get rid of carbon on the planet so we can tax your driving, your airline travel. And, you know, don't worry, we'll still fly in our private jets, but you can't. So this climate change thing has been a huge part of the propaganda, right?
Yeah.
So let me play this clip for you from a documentary called Kiss the Ground. Have you seen this one?
Nope. Great name.
Super amazing documentary. Everybody should watch it. It's on, I want to say it's on Amazon Prime. This is just like a 1-minute clip that explains the entire solution to climate change in like 1 minute.
To be specific, carbon dioxide is a gas. We breathe it out, and plants breathe it in. We also make carbon dioxide by burning fossil fuels. But carbon isn't bad. In fact, it's the basis for all life on Earth.
Is that Woody Harrelson or whatever his name is?
Yeah.
War with carbon. Carbon's the bad guy, and I think this is a lost opportunity. Carbon's the good guy. We're carbon.
Let's go.
I'm 16% carbon, and all of it came from eating vegetation and things that eat vegetation.
Plants use sunlight as energy and they pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They turn it into a carbon fuel, and that's how they grow. But 40% of that carbon fuel, they send down to their roots. They're leaking it out in a very strategic way to soil microorganisms. Plants are feeding soil microorganisms carbon, and the soil microorganisms are bringing plants mineral nutrients. And in the process of all that, those soil microorganisms make a carbon glue out of that carbon fuel. And they make habitat in the soil. They make little pockets in the soil to control the flow of air and water. And that's one of the ways that carbon gets fixed in the soil.
In other words, soil has the unique ability to sequester carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's a big deal. And what's even more amazing? The soil contains an entire universe of life.
That looks dope. I want to watch that.
Yeah, that documentary is another big one for the collective consciousness. Just such a huge shift that one came out recently with a lot of big celebrities in it. Woody Harrelson obviously is the narrator, but there's Tom Brady and Giselle are in it. A bunch of celebrities are in it. And it's really just, it exposes, without saying it, it exposes the entire hoax of climate change, because it explains the real reason why they push climate change, because you always have to look at what industries are going to be affected by positive change. That's one of the first principles of understanding how the matrix works, right?
Yep.
Is that the negative polarity will suppress whatever gets in the way of their profits. And so if you paid attention there, what they were saying is plants are the whole solution to climate change. We need to plant more trees and grow more crops organically, because plants pull enormous amounts of carbon from the atmosphere into the soil. And this documentary, if you watch it, goes deeper into this idea that 2/3 of the soil on our planet has been ruined by monocrops and agricultural, like Monsanto farms.
Yeah.
Because we till the soil, we just destroy it with glyphosate and DDT. So we make this inhospitable environment for the soil to grow real organic food. And then we end up having too much carbon in the atmosphere because the soil can't pull it into the earth anymore. So again, we are the dummies, not Earth. Earth's not just heating up for no reason. We have messed with the natural balance, right, through our factory farming. And so they say we can reestablish carbon balance within a couple seasons if we just start organic farming again and stop spraying glyphosate and destroying the soil with tilling and monocropping. They actually show you the exact calculations, and they show you a heat map, which I wanted to find the clip for but couldn't find it. It's in the documentary. They show you a heat map of the planet, of like a map of Earth through the seasons. And when you get into like winter, fall, winter, before the beginning of spring, they have a red gas on the map that shows the carbon in the atmosphere of Earth, and it gets dark red, and you see the carbon moving all over the map on the atmosphere of the planet as you get through those fall and winter months. And he says, but watch what happens in the spring and summer. And as the ticker goes into, March, April, May, the red goes orange, and then it turns to yellow, and then lime green, and then dark green, and the whole atmosphere changes. All the carbon gets sucked out of the atmosphere. And they said, what do you think caused that? It's just plants growing. It's just the natural balance of Earth doing what it does. It exchanges oxygen and carbon organically. And so we've interrupted Earth's balance through our factory farms, or what is it, like big ag, I think is what they say.
Mm-hmm.
Big ag is really the problem causing climate change. So of course, the controllers have to spin it on something else. Oh, it's you guys driving your cars. Oh, it's cows farting. That's the reason we have climate change. They blame it on everything, but it's us destroying the soil of Earth through factory farming and monocropping. They're not going to say that because that's a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
Yep.
So they have to point the blame elsewhere, right? But really, the good news is this is a non-issue. Yeah. We just have to stop destroying the soil and return to the natural balance. So that's another good thing. We're seeing the climate change narrative unraveling. Whereas for a while, it was one of those subjects you get canceled if you questioned it.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't talk about it. But now we're seeing even mainstream celebrities talking about it in these kind of documentaries. Huge positive sign for humanity.
Yeah, you're bringing some banger clips and topics today.
Thank you, man.
Definitely a nice spread of different topics that are exciting to talk about. So what comes to mind for me in this conversation, whether it's the cloud seeding or this, is just it all comes back to this notion that we talk a lot about, like in our sovereignty series, like with the rabbit hole and stuff, which is this notion of like man-made law versus natural law. And like, how did we find ourselves in this mess, like politically, financially, and like, as far as like being enslaved in a debt-based matrix and all that. And it's like, well, we're following man-made laws, and like there's spiritual aspects to that, right? Like the only person you should be following is God, right? why is another man ruling over you? And that gets into like statutory versus, like legal versus lawful and some of these notions that we've talked about. I see this as the same way, right? It's like we're overlooking or downplaying the significance of aligning our lifestyle choices with natural law. And so like the powers that be, whether it's like the people in charge of like Dubai or the people in charge of the entire United States or the people in charge of the entire globe, they don't value or even seemingly based on their actions acknowledge that natural law reigns supreme. And so they will consistently act in opposition to natural law. And it kind of reminds me of like pharma. You take one pill and then you need 2 other pills to counteract the side effects of what you just did.
Yep.
And then with those 2 other pills, now you have to take this third thing and then in 5 years do this surgery to remove this thing because of the side effects of like, and it creates this whole cascade because you're not honoring natural law. And so we see that in like name a system, it doesn't matter, right? This you could consider the weather system or the weather modification or whatever. They're trying to play God. And it's like when you don't honor natural law, there's going to be side effects. And so like if you're going to try to create rain when there's not supposed to be, then you're going to have to take these other 2 pills for the heartburn and indigestion that first pill is going to give you. And then these other 2 pills, that one of the side effects is that, maybe you'll literally kill yourself. You'll have such bad suicidal ideation that you'll literally just think it's best to off yourself. And then and so now you need to be on an SSRI too. And then so now because of that SSRI, now you have gut issues. And so now you need to also be on something else. And it's like, it's madness. Yeah. And I think we're doing that same thing, but in different ways. Like in every single system that we've analyzed, like in the Rabbit Hole series, every single system is doing the same thing. And the answer to all of it is very simple. It's just like align your life at an individual level, like me and you, but also at a community, at a family, and then at a community, and then at a city, and then at a state, and then at a country, and then at a global level. We have to align our lives with natural law. Whether or not, like, we don't have to agree on the same God or anything like that, but there has to be at least an acknowledgement of the universe. Like people acknowledge gravity, they acknowledge some of these forces of physics, but they look at natural law for some reason as not the same, and it's very much so the same.
Yeah, it's like you can be a Muslim, I'll be a Jew, he can be a Christian. But we all acknowledge whatever this God is we all worship in different ways clearly made this earth.
Yeah.
And this earth clearly works a certain way. And you're very right that all we're seeing in all these different systems is just this descent into madness as we deviate farther and farther from natural law. It's the same consciousness we see in the pharma industry of the body's stupid and dumb and it breaks down easily. The body doesn't know what it's doing. We know what the body should do. So we'll impose upon the body with our surgeries and our drugs and force the body to do what we want it to do. Same consciousness with the weather, with the soil, with the earth. The earth is dumb and doesn't know we need rain. So let's make it rain. Let's force it to rain. It's the same exact consciousness everywhere that represents our falling away from natural law. And it's like, why do you think we see big disasters? Huge tornadoes like the one in Nebraska. A lot of these disasters are natural. They're not always weather modification, although these weather modification technologies like we're seeing with cloud seeding, and China's been doing this for a long time in the open, saying, oh yeah, we modify our own weather all the time, every day. It's using those technologies to create a false disaster like climate change. They can say, look, it's getting really bad. Did you see Dubai? You see that tornado? You see that hurricane? You see that earthquake? We really are. Climate change is real, guys. So panic, panic, fear, fear. Give us your rights. Give us your money. Let us tax you and we can solve your problems. That's where they want to shift the attention because they're the ones causing the problem through the deviations from natural law, through destroying our soil, not respecting the beautiful, divine, majestic process of Mother Earth, which is organic, it's free, we don't have to do anything, it does it by itself. All we have to do is stop interfering with it. And mankind's obsession with money is like, how do we maximize profits? Increase those crops, increase that soil, more spraying, more this, more that. And every time we try to extract more money from the earth through using the earth for money, we step farther from natural law. And that was, again, a big part of the Essenes philosophy, is that there is no spiritual ascension before you first come into alignment with the earthly mother. And you follow her ways, you obey her holy laws, and you live in obedience to them. And she blesses you with infinite abundance, infinite energy, as we talked about, infinite food. Like, dude, I was at a Eclipse Festival a few weeks ago in Bandera, Texas, with a bunch of friends. And we're on this farm with about 150 people. And we're talking to these farmers. There's doctors there, naturopaths, there's technologists, engineers, all kinds of gifted people. And we're just talking about, like, how do we build a new earth? What does it need to look like? And one of the first things that I said was, I think we need, number one, law experts to be like the container of the society. People that really understand the law and how to interface with the law are like the defenders of those communities who stand on the outskirts, the perimeter, and protect it from the tentacles of the negative polarity trying to come in and steal our technology, destroy our innovations and communities. We need law experts for that. And that's why the universe is raising up law experts right now. At the center, we need a common spirituality to be like the pole in the center of the tent, so to speak, that holds the society together, where we worship the Creator together. We don't have to agree on what we call it or any of that, but we agree that there's one God, that God is love, that God is unity. We acknowledge these principles as being eternally true. And that keeps the society together. And from there, we create free energy. We have all kinds of people providing food and all the things you need to run a society. And there were some farmers there who said, we have friends back where we're from who have this free energy technology that they use through the soil. And they said that I don't know what it is, it has something to do with algae, that they extract energy from algae. They say that it heals the soil. They said in 4 years, you can reconstitute and reheal the soil in 4 years, which would normally take 500 years for that soil to heal. You can regenerate it that quickly. And at the same time, the energy the soil gives off, you can use it for free energy. So they said they run their entire farm, and you could run like a neighborhood of 100 homes on just like a quarter of an acre of land using this technology. So it gives you an idea of like what is possible if we come together and start building communities using natural law to our advantage. Like Earth has given us everything we need to thrive and be in abundance. We've just wandered so far away into this matrix world that we forget, no, the Earth isn't dumb. No, the body's not dumb. No, it's not broken. Our understanding of it's broken.
100%.
Our awareness of it is broken.
Damn, that's powerful. A quarter of an acre.
They said a quarter of an acre can power 100 homes for free and produce crops and heal the soil at the same time.
That's baffling. And that goes to show the programming.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's hard to even imagine.
Yeah. But I mean, dude, that's how amazing Mother Nature is.
I know. All right. So transitioning to my next clip. First, we have a clip, and then I'll pull up a little article about it.
Preview. Patrick's not the only one who can leak things. This is the Stripe checkout you know and love, and it's got all the cool functionality. Like again, a big one for us is localization, where it looks different. You see here, depending on where the customer is coming from.
This is huge, dude.
High converting, localized experience. But what's this new functionality over here on the right? We can pay with crypto. So
gets better. Here
we'll go to a confirmation screen, and so did I actually? We're on Hypernian. The ghost of Christmas past. So this is our confirmation page. We passed in the email address for the checkout. Here we're selecting what chain we want to pay with. We're going to pay with Solana. Here we're selecting, what wallet we want to use. We can use Coinbase wallet or MetaMask. I'm going to use Phantom for the purposes of this demo. So when I pay here, it's going to bring up some UI from Phantom, which is the crypto wallet that we're using. So this is the Phantom UI here. This is not Stripe UI. And you see here we're confirming. We're going to pay with Solana, the network fee, very cheap, as we discussed, a network fee is coming down, $99. Now, again, you're probably used to a crypto transaction. You're expecting, me to...
Do you see that fee amount?
8-minute conversation while we wait for the transaction to clear. But that is old crypto. Are you ready for the new crypto world? You have to look very closely and not blink. You ready? Oh, that tap. That's it. We're done. And
immediate payment.
confirmation page was not like, this has been entered in a queue, we're going to now go do something. It has now been posted to the blockchain already. And so if I go into my Phantom wallet here and go into the Explorer, you see here, sent at 9:58 today, we can view on the Solana Explorer. This is, I think the Explorer just loading is on the blockchain. Here we go. This is, so you can go to this URL yourself if you are eagle-eyed and see this is a real posted transaction to the Solana chain. Similarly, we can view it in the Stripe dashboard. So if we click in here to our 9:58 a.m. payment, you see here, we've made a payment with crypto. And again, Stripe handles everything for you. You just got $98 into your bank account. But that is crypto coming back to Stripe.
So for you to understand the gravity of that, that isn't just Stripe integrating crypto. If you noticed, he sent it in Solana or stablecoin on Solana blockchain, and immediately he had USD in his Stripe account. So that isn't just one technological leap of like, finally they're integrating crypto. That is also a massive thing of like, so normally when you send crypto, depending on what you're talking about, like if you send Bitcoin, it might take 30 minutes to show up. The current Swift banking system, you wire money, you're looking at 48 hours.
Yep.
And it has to be Monday to Friday. So that's obviously a dinosaur technology, right? So crypto is somewhat replacing that. But even with crypto, one of the issues there's been is like you send crypto and then, cool, well, the merchant, if you want to integrate this into your business, has to have crypto set up. They have to have a crypto wallet, and you're really just sending crypto to crypto, and it kind of gets complicated of like checks and balances and accounting and all that stuff. But with this, like a business owner, whoever wants to use it, doesn't even need to have crypto set up. You have the option now to pay in crypto, and it's immediately like Stripe did that. It handled everything. So whereas the Solana or the stablecoin on Solana hasn't even technically shown up in the other wallet yet, it can confirm on the Ethernet that it showed you that the transaction succeeded, and so they credit you. Kind of like when you pay off an Amex credit card, they'll instantly update your balance. Whereas when you pay with other credit cards, it won't update until it registers, if that makes sense. Because Amex is crediting you, basically.
Yeah.
And then you'll be able to spend that. Like if you're about to check out and you're like, oh, my card's maxed out, let me make a payment real quick. And then you swipe it. It will instantly work. Similar concept here. So you're instantly receiving USD in, even though they sent it in crypto. And so that's a complete game changer, and that's rolling out this summer.
Oh, man.
So
that excites me, bro.
Yeah, we're like literally here. And I've, we've been waiting for this moment, like with the work that I do in my community since 2020. And it seems like, it seemed like it would get here faster. And at the same time, it's all happened very fast. It's both fast and slow, but it's super exciting. So I'm going to pull up an article real quick to just give a little bit more deets to people. So Stripe brings back crypto payments via USDC stablecoin, April 25th, 2024. And so it tried this in 2018, but it was too early. Things were too volatile. The technology wasn't there yet. But the main things I want to show is that, number one, right here, later this summer, and it will initially only start with USDC, but then they'll expand. And that was the video I showed you. And then check this out. Obviously, they're giving validity to the expansion, but this is the cool part. So payments are going to be available on Solana, Ethereum, and Polygon blockchains starting out. So it's already giving validity to, for example, other layer ones. And so Matic is a layer 2. These are all things that we invest in the LUC, things that I teach on for our students. But Solana is a layer 1. Ethereum is the biggest layer 1, and then Polygon is a layer 2. I imagine because it's a totally different technology. So Bitcoin isn't a layer 1. It operates on its own like Bitcoin SegWit network.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know, like this is above my pay grade in terms of understanding the tech and all that, but my assumption and my guess is that So the closest company that is cracking this for Bitcoin is something called the Lightning Network, and the CEO of that is Jack Mallers. So he's a young dude, and he goes on.
I thought Bitcoin invented the Lightning Network.
Sorry, it's called Strike, not the
okay.
Lightning Network. It uses the Lightning Network. You're right, but Strike is like the biggest one making innovations in terms of that. So like realistically, in the next, let's say 18 months or so, when we start to see these things roll out, from what I understand, Strike has the biggest lead in terms of that stuff. And so as far as Stripe, not to be confused with Strike, is concerned, I would imagine there may be limitations to where they have to use layer 1s and layer 2s, but I'm really not positive. Maybe they're just starting with that and then they'll expand. So crypto.com. So this is one of the most common crypto brokerages, right? If you're going to buy crypto and you're not super advanced, you're probably looking at Coinbase or you're looking at crypto.com. Okay, if we go up here to products and you see these different options, right? Right here, advanced training, pay for businesses, right? And we click that, go to merchants platform. You can sign up already, and they're already offering payments for over 50 million users today. So it uses the example right here of like a Shopify store or whatever, like something related to clothes.
Dude,
and
it has
so
begun.
We don't the news doesn't report on this type of stuff. Like if you're not studying this stuff and keeping up with the advancement of innovation like I do for a living, then you don't really notice it until all of a sudden it sweeps the nation. You know what I mean? And all the news is talking about it, but then it's too late.
It's too late.
That's when the hysteria happens. So I wanted to make sure to touch on this stuff this episode because number one, I talked all about this with my community when Stripe rolled that out and just kind of breaking down for them like how huge this is. Number one, I'm literally going to be using that. Like I'm a fan as a business owner. I can't tell you how many people are like, hey, can we pay with blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, unfortunately, we tried the Coinbase option in 2021. It just wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
And then there's that aspect of you have to set up a wallet and then that can be potentially trackable. And there were a number of reasons why it just wasn't there yet. And now with this option where it's like, you don't even have to, it doesn't matter what they want to pay you in as long as it's agreed upon and available by Stripe. They just quickly pay you, it transfers it, and then you're good to go. You know what I mean? And that keeps your checks and balances in order. It's easy to track like your revenue and stuff. You're not sent this fluctuating coin that maybe you don't even want to hold. You know what I mean? So that makes it easy on the business owner's perspective. But more so than that, from the investor lens, which is, more so what I do for a living, is like, this is what mass adoption looks like. This is what will usher it in. Part of it was the Bitcoin conversation when we were the Bitcoin ETFs and everything, and institutions are now already validated that they're already in. The other piece is the consumer, the everyday person, the 8 billion people in the world. How many of them are actually using this, right? So when we start to see like this pop up, like for example, if you're just scrolling Shopify and you go to check out and all of a sudden there's a crypto option, I mean, it's going to start to be everywhere. So I wanted to show people just a few options here. And then the other thing I want to talk about is we are now at 420 million wallets. That's the current statistic of how many people hold crypto. Whether that's $1 or $1 billion, there's 420 million users right around that range right now. Now, if you study things like network effects, Metcalfe's law, and some of these rules that govern innovation and rate of expansion amongst like technology, you know that Metcalfe's law talks about like the value of a network is essentially the number of its users squared. And so as you grow a user's base with any given technology, it inherently becomes more valuable. And that's kind of what it means to talk about network effects, right? Like if you have a community of 2 people, that can only be so valuable in terms of reciprocity. But if you have a community of 1,000 people, that becomes a lot more valuable and you start to achieve like scale. And with us at 420 million crypto wallets today, Metcalfe's law when you graph out crypto. And I've done a whole ebook on this for anyone who's interested. You can go to our my website, jgriff.org. But I did a lot of research on this, and the internet in the 90s, it was growing at about 60 to 80% year over year in terms of adoption, right? Throughout the 90s, 2000s, that was the craziest technology we had seen at that point. And if you were an investor in the internet or tech companies in the 90s or 2000s, you became filthy rich.
You got bags.
That is what we call Web 2.0. Now with Web 3.0, we're talking about blockchain, cryptocurrency, decentralized finance. When you overlay crypto thus far since its inception over the internet, it's actually outpacing it. Crypto is doubling every year. It's 100% per year so far, year over year adoption in terms of users. Once again, we're not measuring price action. That will always fluctuate and revert to the mean. We're measuring use case. How many users? How fast does it become a worldwide technology since its inception is what we're measuring. So, Aaron, we're at 420 million today. Let's just call it that for an even number. And it has us doubling 100% a year. So what that means is that in just over 12 months, we're going to reach 1 billion users. That's 1/8 of the world's population.
Dude.
There's only about 8 billion of us globally. Mm-hmm. So to me, this is like massive, combination of a fourth turning vibes with like, this is what we've needed. A piece of it was the institutional aspect, because if so much of the global liquidity in the world is run by institutions, hedge funds, banks, money managers, the 1%, right? The BlackRocks, the State Streets, the Chase business and all that. And so that was a big piece of it. And we talked about that in past episodes. The approval of the Bitcoin ETFs, huge. Already cemented it in, like this is here to stay. But that's only for like people entering into Bitcoin through their 401ks, IRAs, as well as like the 1% now has vehicles to use.
For like baby boomers.
But that doesn't change our actual economy. You're at a local farmer's market and you want to buy, a few tinctures of some homemade jelly or something. And instead of pulling out your Amex to do your little tap, they accept crypto. It's all those little things, right? Or instead of having to do a wire transfer and wait for your monolithic, 48 hours, or you're doing it on a Friday and you don't even see it until Tuesday. And it's like, are you serious? This is where we're at. Like all those little aspects, that is when it becomes a real global use case in the economy, and price action will follow that.
Yeah.
Actually, usually it precedes that, because especially in risk assets and growth assets, usually investors front run anywhere from 6 to 12 months of what they believe adoption will be. It's not the other way around. But my point is that this is like nail in the coffin. Like there's nothing to say anymore. It's just like you're either involved in this, or you're literally going to tell your grandkids about how you fumbled the bag on the biggest generational opportunity.
Yeah.
Because there's not many left. Real estate?
Yeah.
Trading your time for money?
Definitely not.
Gold and silver? All the things that worked for the prior generations, we only have this one. This is our generations. For our parents, they got to capitalize on that tech boom that I was talking about. Some of you are maybe old enough to where you did, but Aaron, me and you, we didn't get to. I was growing up in the 90s. I wasn't investing.
Yeah.
I didn't get to invest in Apple when they had like their first rainbow colored logo, if you remember those. And
yeah, I do.
Before it became, what Steve Jobs made it and everything. Like, so, cool. You can invest in Apple now. You might see a wonderful, 20% a year. It beats the S&P, but that's not how you build wealth, right? That's how you maintain it, maybe. Silver, same thing. Investing in a home. I mean, maybe, hopefully you won't lose money. It's just going to be tied to them printing, but you're not going to build wealth. So it's like, how are you going to build what? Well, that's going to come from innovation. That's going to come from doing things differently. Well, what is this generation's greatest contribution of doing things differently? Well, that's going from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. And this is what ties in our audience and everything that we talk about in terms of like fulfilling your dharma and service to others path and everything like that, because this means of economics is decentralized. And it is a way more fair way of having value transfer because, guys, it can't be stolen from you. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that can be in existence. And I'm not going to sit here and explain to you why that is. You do the research on that. That is really important to understand because even gold and silver can be mined. There's not technically a set amount. Like, for example, if you say in 1950, the amount that was in existence is the same as in 2024. That's not true. Mm-hmm. They mine it. So it's technically limited. It's
and the
scarce.
Earth creates more of it.
To a degree, but it's not the type of thing where if we needed some, we couldn't go get some. That it's always ebbing and flowing. So even our biggest stores of value all throughout history aren't actually technically finite. And cryptocurrency is the first thing to come along and go, yo, it can't be manipulated by a government. No one can come in and change the code. It's fully decentralized. And anyone in the world can do global transfers immediately. And then the tax implications, that's a whole separate conversation, but it's a lot fairer in terms of that as well. Mm-hmm. There's options for complete privacy coins that have no tax implications, not financial advice, do your own research. And there's, everything in between. But even putting that to the side, like, this is where the fourth turning aligns with the spiritual awakening that's going on, aligns with the actual shift to our monetary policy. And it's beautiful to see because, like, we talk about it over and over and over. I mean, for me especially, I've talked about it so many times for so many years. But this is a game of patience. Like, I was already there in 2020 prepping my students, but it's like, it didn't happen overnight and it's still not here, but you get what I'm saying. Like it happens so slowly. And as you said in the beginning, like it seems like it goes so slow until all of a sudden it happens all at once. And I really feel that this year is that all at once moment.
I agree.
Like a lot of us who were in the space, we wanted that to be 2020. It was like money printing, everything's going up and like the innovation, it's amazing. But we were too early. They didn't have the use cases because what happened was Web 2, call that the tech companies and the banks and the financial products out there, right? Like the Stripes, the PayPals, the Squares, the whatever merchant processors, plus the banks, call all of that Web 2 in like the finance realm. They weren't integrated and bought into fully the use case of crypto yet. They weren't fully there. So even though all of us were, us meaning like the retail investors, the actual like to go out into the marketplace and be like, all right, let's use it in our everyday life, that wasn't there because the existing leaders in the space who had cemented themselves in the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s, who are now the Apples, the PayPals, the Squares, the Stripes, they weren't fully bought in. And so they needed to kind of wait and be patient, right? Because they have a lot to lose. They needed more legislation. They needed to see more use case. They needed to see Metcalfe's law happen for a few more years. They weren't convinced when we were at 100 million. They weren't convinced when we were at 200 million. They needed to see BlackRock themselves go from, this is a ridiculous Ponzi scheme, we will never touch it, to the biggest cheerleader of it going on tours, PR tours, saying this is the complete finite asset. It's digital gold. Get your hands on it.
Yep.
And now that everyone's bought in, it's like, that's the opportunity as an investor, right? To front run that. But I say all that to say, like, even investing aside, it's just, it's exciting because this show is about the human story and the collective consciousness. And this is a real opportunity at a fair barter system because it's also not just going to be one and the government isn't going to be in control of it. And the 9 families that secretly met on Jekyll Island aren't going to be in control of it. And so they can't keep changing the rules to the game and redefining what it means to be a currency and like slowly stealing from you, either via taxes up front or inflation via the back end. None of that can exist anymore. And there's going to be able to be a lot of currencies, what we would refer to as a multi-chain world, where it's like, cool, you don't like Ethereum. It's too expensive. Gas fees are too high. I agree with you. That's the use case for Solana. It's faster and it's cheaper. And Phantom, which is I'm very bullish on, my students know that, even faster and cheaper than that. And if you're very into privacy and you're like, all of those are like transparently shown on the blockchain, the government can look into that. Okay, cool. Then you got things like Darrow and Monero and Ghost Chain fully private. So it's like, it's a whole new world. And we get to participate in that. I'm fucking excited, man. Both to use it and to be a customer.
Yeah. I got lit up just when you pulled up the webpage where it said Stripe is now accepting crypto. Because my students in my programs have been begging me to accept crypto. And I'm like, it doesn't exist. These payment processors don't accept it yet. As soon as they do, of course, I'll roll it out. But these are some of the biggest payment processors in the world. Stripe, Shopify. Do you know if PayPal uses crypto at all yet?
Oh, yeah. PayPal's been integrated in crypto. But as far as letting a business owner getting paid like exactly how Stripe just laid out, they haven't rolled that out yet. But I can assure you they have about 6 to 9 months to do that before Stripe eats their market share.
Yep. Exactly my thoughts. So the way I see this, dude, is like a dam holding back a giant reservoir of water, which is crypto. And the dam represents like the market. And they've been trying to hold this innovation back, or really it would be like the government and the mega corporations that are afraid of cryptocurrency and what that means for them. The first ETF, Bitcoin ETF we touched on in February was like the first crack in the dam where some water starts to spurt out. And this is like a freaking hole exploding in part of the dam, just spraying out water. And you're like, oh, here it comes. And we're all running for the hills because this flood's about to come. Like, that's what this feels like to me. Because when you get the top payment processors in the world accepting crypto like this, where you can do lightning transactions instantaneously from crypto to fiat dollars in your wallet, we're talking about the usability of crypto going through the roof, which then, of course, affects the price of the crypto coin as well, which means for me, this means the next bull market we're heading towards probably just got even more bullish, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like, no doubt.
It creates a flywheel. So it's like more people being able to use this. Obviously, it's going to attract more users and more people paying in it, which means more people need to buy it. That sends the price up, which increases adoption, which then makes more people want to buy it, which then increases adoption more. And so it's like this will funnel in a lot more people adopting and using, even if just to pay with it or to be paid with it. And then that just further increases Metcalfe's law and more adoption. And then more adoption means price action has to go up because it ebbs and flows. Like if you overlaid price action on the graph over top adoption of the actual network users, like I was talking about, 420 million, you would see it kind of does like a heartbeat of like up and down, up and down. Mm-hmm. But it always reverts to the mean and it's always trending up and to the left.
Right.
So it's like over a long enough time period that this is the generational wealth transfer. It's right in front of your eyes. It's so simple that most people are going to fumble the bag. Yep. And that's really what I'm trying to make sure it doesn't happen. And I want to add one thing about Stripe. Stripe passed 1 trillion in total payment volume in 2023. Just for you to understand, sure, it's easy to think of Stripe as a small business. Like if you're not a business owner, or even if you are, it seems like it's one of the most common choices for a small business merchant processors, right? 1 trillion.
That's not small.
This is the scale that we're talking about annually, and that's trending up year over year. And so what percentage of that will be in crypto? Those are either like buy orders or customers having to buy it to use it, or customers continuing to hold some of this stuff on the side to make transactions, or business owners, or whatever it may be. So it creates some of those flywheels that I was talking about, where it's just like now business owners have a reason to hold it and use it, and customers of businesses have a reason to hold it and use it. And that's an entirely new addressable market than it is me and you, who are just like, we see the vision, we're going to invest in it. Like that's a different conversation to say like, I'm going to buy it now and sell it in the future, than it is to say like, I'm genuinely a fan. I would just use it anyway, even if it wasn't investable, because I believe in the product and it has added value to my life. It has saved me time. It has saved me effort. It has brought legitimate like quality of life increase into my life. Mm-hmm. And so that's what's exciting to me, because the majority of the world, they're not thinking about it as an investor, right? Like when you're in either we could think of it as lower levels of consciousness or Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or you're just concerned about like your safety and survival. You're not thinking about like, oh, I'm going to capitalize on where the world's at in 10 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're literally just like, my country, like I live in Venezuela and my country is crushing me with their corruption and money printing. Our inflation is 300%. Don't quote me on that. I'm literally just, this is a hypothetical example. You live in a third world country. Your country is corrupt. Your leaders are corrupt and everyone knows it, but they rule via fear and power. And so they print your currency to oblivion. What is your only solution? Immediately transfer, when you get paid, transfer it into Bitcoin. That is what it means to be a store of value. And so like for most of the world, like we're at 12.5% global adoption. For most of the world, global adoption looks like just use cases of every day. It doesn't look like I'm going to get rich off of this thing. And so for us to go from where we're at right now to like the entire globe, the majority of the entire globe using it, that's going to look like the everyday use case of just being able to store your wealth in it, just being able to make transactions with it at the supermarket and whatever it may be. And so for those of us that are investing in it, that's where the upside comes in.
Yeah. It is a whole new world for crypto in the sense that we've only seen crypto being used as a store of value, as an investment option. Up until now, it hasn't been able to be used in the market yet.
Yep.
At the farmer's market, at the mall, in my small business. And now we're going to see cryptocurrency moving, being fluid like money should be fluid like water. And what is that going to do to the market?
Yeah.
We can't even probably predict it. We could be at the precipice of something bigger than even you and I can conceive of right now. You know, and that's what's exciting.
Yeah.
Because like the Maslow's Law thing is cool. You said it's doubling every year.
Metcalf's.
You said, Metcalf, sorry. We'll be at a billion users, wallets in a year. Well, then in 3 years, that's the whole planet. Because the next year it's 2 billion, and then it's 4 billion, and then it's 8 billion. So yeah, literally in 3 years, potentially, if the trajectory continues, we're looking at a completely different world. And a world that is 2 giant leaps closer to the new Earth when we're using decentralized currency.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dude, besides free energy, that's the biggest move for the new world that there is available. So that's so exciting.
Yep.
So I guess we'll transition now to our last segment of the show, bold predictions.
Cool.
And I'll share my screen for you to play this clip.
You're talking about all these protesting. 108 people arrested, students at Columbia, 47 Yale, 120 at NYU, at University of Minnesota. Have you guys seen all these camping, what these kids are doing? Rob, can you show some of these videos with the protests going on across the country on universities?
That's USC, Los Angeles.
Go ahead and play this clip, Rob.
What would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About
Look,
what?
look.
Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Watch.
I wish I was more educated.
No, God.
Oh.
I was there up at Columbia and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support. So I came down.
You can pause it, Rob. What a great line. Yeah. On a university campus, a student saying, I wish I was more educated. I agree. I wish you were. By the way.
Did you see that clip?
No, I didn't.
Ah, okay. So we've seen these big protests, right, on university campuses about Palestine. And to me, the implications of this are so huge because, you know, what did we see in 2016 right before the election? Mass chaos and protests and stuff. 2020, right before the election, BLM, Antifa protests, burning down cities, small businesses by the thousands, COVID hysteria, panic at a super all-time high, right? Chaos. Now we're moving into another election year. And what are we seeing? Crazy protests all over university campuses, all over the country. right on cue, right? So it's like something, I think there's some natural forces that make the chaos happen, but clearly with media, government, propagandists, funders like George Soros, people are manipulating the chaos at these election years. Like right around 6 months, 6 to 8 months before these elections, we see the chaos spike like crazy. And so I think the Israel-Palestine conflict was the tactic of chaos for this election cycle that I think we're seeing it now coming back to bite the controllers in a big way. Because I really think, man, I've been watching this on the news, and it seems to me that the Israel-Palestine conflict strife that's been stirred up through the media and education system, it's really causing an awakening on the left. The controllers can't keep a lid on everything, right? We give them way too much power, especially in the truth movement, that these people are like gods, they do whatever they want. Absolutely not true. They're totally fallible people just like anyone else who can't predict the future, and they just do their best. So it's like they push certain buttons and they poke certain things, hoping that the result goes their way. But it doesn't always go their way. And we're seeing it more and more often not going their way since 2020, because they think they can predict how people are going to react to their psyops. It's what they've been doing for hundreds of years. Problem, reaction, solution. We've done this rinse, repeat for hundreds of years. We got this. And suddenly the reaction isn't being controlled like they used to be able to control it. Why? Because mainstream media has collapsed. That's been their tool for the reaction part of the 3-step process, right?
Right.
And now it's been flattened, and it's podcasts, it's independent media and journalism. Yep. So it's like the fact that the negative polarity functions on hierarchy and secrecy, that's been their strength for so long, but now it's starting to become their downfall, because these university professors who are lecturing these kids on all these different kinds of indoctrination, like I think people imagine that the doctors, university professors, corporate DEI agents, people tend to think that they're like totally in on the psyop. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they're going home at night, switching on a hologram of a dark hooded figure like a Sith Lord looking guy who's like running the world and the deep cabal agents. And, and he's like, Master, the students are responding to the propaganda perfectly, my liege. And the guy's like, yes, soon they will be converted to the dark side. That's not the reality, right? These professors, these campus leaders, doctors, DEI agents, they're just as indoctrinated as the students and everybody else is, right? So these democratic organizations who've been brainwashing with propaganda, the education system, college students for the past decade are starting to turn against the controllers. And they're starting to bite the hand that feeds them, right? We saw, I'll actually share this article of George Soros that came out, has been funding these protests, the anti-Israel protests, which is really interesting because, we'll get into the implications of Zionism versus Judaism in a second. But like here, for example, this is a Fox News article. Left-wing dark money group funds bail legal support for anti-Israel agitators who are blocking traffic. And they go in to show the threads of George Soros, funding these protests, just like BLM and Antifa. And so now these protests are starting to do harm to the corporations and the billionaires that are funding them by going against their narrative. Because as you and I know, and we've talked about on the show, we talked about this a lot with the P. Diddy stuff, that there's these sort of like Zionist groups, cult, if you want to call it that, which is not the same thing as Judaism. My good friend Jason Shurka is a Hebrew, a Jew by both ethnicity and religion. He's broken this down for me a number of times, that Zionism tends to be at the top levels, the elite levels of the banking industry, Hollywood, universities, institutions. It's like the shield that they use to protect themselves of, you can't talk bad about us or you're an anti-Semite.
Right.
But what many Jewish friends of mine, and Jason Shurka included, say is that these people actually hate actual Jews. They're not Jews themselves. It's like, it's a false front, right, for protection. And because whether it's Israel or the Zionists, they're in co-op with the American government, the British government, for the war we're seeing, right, with Palestine, the genocide in Palestine, and they run all these industries. And now you have campuses all across the United States that are hard anti-Israel protests. And I think what they wanted was just to stir up more division between Jewish students and Palestinian groups and students. And it hasn't become that. It's become way worse than that. It's turned into a full-on anti-Israel movement where now you're seeing, they're chanting and showing up at the White House to protest Biden to withdraw support from Israel and stop the genocide. And, all these celebrities are coming out on TV and social media being like, we condemn the anti-Israel protests, because the Zionists are telling them to do that, right? We run this industry. You do what we say. Get online and start telling these students to stop protesting us. And they're like, we don't care. We see you guys as the bad guys now. We're awakened now to the fact that left and right really are both in on it together. I mean, we're seeing the left wake up to that, which the right has woken up to a few years prior. And, the right was complaining about Ukraine getting $100 billion a few years ago. And the left was like, no, give it to Ukraine. And now the left is saying, don't give $100 billion to Israel. And the right's like, that's what we were saying a few years ago. So what I see in this is like, there's a merger happening slowly but surely of left and right, where like, these are first principles, right? What goes up must come down. We've seen the pendulum swing as far to the side of division as it can swing. And now we're going to see that pendulum swinging back because both sides of the political aisle, which have been divided through propaganda, are now realizing, hey, we share a common enemy, so to speak. And I say enemy loosely, of course, in a relative sense. We've all heard the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And my prediction here is essentially that we're going to see all of these psyops, the war in Israel and Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, all the crazy stuff happening in the States alone. And now, the clips we showed in the UK, there's so many psyops happening from governments and corporations and billionaires like George Soros, that people are just waking up so fast and beginning to realize our real enemy is not you and I, but the people that are trying to control us and ruin our lives. And the left seems to care more about social justice stuff. The right seems to care more about freedom-based stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the same people and governments and institutions causing both of those problems. So I think we really are seeing that pendulum swinging back from the side of division. And I think the left and right are going to sort of start to blend again like we used to be blended. And it used to be totally okay for like a husband and wife to be on different political sides. It was like being a Christian or a Catholic, like, who really cares? Like, not that big of a difference. And for the last like 10 years, dude, like you can't even speak to somebody in our country who's not on your political camp. So much separation, so much division. And I see this Israel-Palestine thing as a very telling sign that it's coming back the other direction, which is a great sign for humanity. And more than anything, dude, like I'm just a serial optimist at this point. I truly am. I'm not worried about whatever comes next, whatever psyop is next. To me, it doesn't matter. It's undeniably clear to me that at this point, they have woken up humanity and there's nothing they can do that will not continue to awaken humanity. And I think that's why they're being very careful about what their next move is going to be. They've been testing out the cyber attack thing. They're testing out another pandemic thing. We hear these rumors, but they kind of pull back because I think they're paying attention to the pulse of independent media and social media. And they're going, man, everyone's talking about our next psyop already. Like maybe we shouldn't risk it because COVID was not what they expected. I think they got shell shocked with the response to COVID. And they're like, oh crap, these people are way less dumb and way more awake than we thought. And so now they're like, I think they're kind of biting their nails a bit, so to speak, of what is going to be our next psyop. And they're testing things out. We saw the Baltimore Bridge thing, like what's going to be the thing that works? And so they're going to try something at some point, probably very soon, definitely before the election. But it doesn't matter, right? Humanity is awake. We're going to keep waking up, and whatever the negative polarity does is just going to contribute to the awakening at this point.
Facts. Yeah, it's just like we've been saying, no matter what happens, it's a good thing. It's either accelerating it or we're becoming more and more aware either way. So I like your prediction. We do live in a world where it's literally like there's so many coexisting psyops that it's like
I know it's hard to keep up, dude.
Yeah. And nor do you even need to keep up, because that's where there's that aspect of just faith and understanding,
Only when you have a show called The Great Awakening and you have to research clips to show.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, we do need to keep up a little bit, but
for the people.
Yeah, for the people. All right, guys. So my prediction is going to be just carrying on with what I was saying and taking things a little bit deeper for you to spell things out very clearly. So in 2025, my prediction is that before the year 2025 is over, we're going to reach 1 billion active users in crypto.
Let's go.
That is 12.5% of the entire globe will own some form of crypto in a wallet. We're going to see purchasing with crypto in a retail context go mainstream, and the competitors are going to pour in once this happens. Once you have one big player make their move, whether that's like Strike with the Lightning Network, whether it's Stripe with some of the layer ones we showed, whether it's crypto.com, whether Coinbase tries to come in, or imagine literally a bank coming out, or Apple, Chase, like it's about to unlock game theory. And I don't know how familiar you are, Aaron, with game theory, or the audience with game theory, but it's a fascinating lens through which to view some of this. You can kind of think of it also like the art of war, but more in a gamified sense, where it's like there's real risk to being the first adopter, right? Because what if it doesn't work, and you can get sued and the regulators will be harder on you and all of that. Cool. But once that dam is broken, then it's like everyone almost has to rush in according to the rules of game theory, because it's now too risky to not be allocated. In other words, we recently crossed this threshold in crypto where the riskier move is to not own cryptocurrency than it is to own cryptocurrency. And that is saying that given the risk of World War III, the risk of the government shutting it down, the risk of scams, the risk of everything that may occur or not occur, I understand all that. And we crossed the threshold to where game theory would now say that it is riskier to not own it than to own it. And we're hitting that threshold now in terms of businesses and Web 2, like I was talking a bit about a little bit ago, Aaron, where Web 2 businesses, the Stripes, the PayPals, now have to make a decision. When Stripe rolls this out, you're going to have, 6, 9, 12 months where Stripe is just going to eat market share from all the other merchant processors because there is only one solution on the market. And so you're going to see people rush in. And once, let's say, Stripe has it and PayPal has it and Square has it, imagine this. You know those little things that plug into the phones that you can use for Square, that swipe credit cards? Yep. Imagine literally just pulling up your crypto wallet and you tap it on that. Like, that's crazy. You have a hot wallet on your phone, you pull up your MetaMask or something, and you just tap it like that. So it's like, once we start seeing these use cases, then you have the bigger, more monolithic banks, right? The Chases, you also have brokerages, you have all these things going on. Well, they're going to have to find a way to compete in this space, or they're going to get their market share massively eaten by the little guys. And so you activate this, what's called game theory, and who benefits from this? All of us. They are now competing. And what is the outcome they're competing for? Not intentionally, but because they have to.
Yeah.
They're competing for a fairer, more just system. Not because they want to, but because they want money. And they need to compete in that sense for market share, for profits, for revenue. And on our end, that benefits us with a more fair, more just system and a real generational opportunity. I'm going to continue to say this for the people in the back. A real generational opportunity for the average person, the middle class, to build actual wealth that you're not going to find in real estate. You're not going to find in stock indexes and the S&P. You're not going to find in CDs and bonds and money market accounts. And you're not going to find working a job where your money is stolen year over year via inflation. So I predict, number one, the billion users in crypto. Number two, this year, a big rollout and then competitors starting to come into the space, whether that's crypto.com, Coinbase, a lot of the big players. We'll see what brokerages in the stock market do as well. Think of Robinhood, could be a big player. They just recently rolled out, they're offering 5.25% APY for any cash you leave sitting in your brokerage. They also just rolled out a credit card where you get perks and cash back that you can then use They attracted something like $6 billion in less than 3 months.
Wow.
I mean, they're making moves. So you start to unlock these economics where it's like, well, you know, what is E-Trade going to do? What is Schwab going to do? What is Chase Bank going to do? These type of big players who have trillions, what are they going to do? So it will be a very interesting next 12, 18 months. And then I want to take it a step further and talk about, I see this working in synergy with the election, because so much of this was held back. Like I said, we were almost there in 2020, but the regulators weren't there. They weren't taking it seriously. We had years to go before the SEC was finally willing to stop preventing the inevitable. And so I see this working in synergy. And one of the ways I see this is, for example, we've now grown to a point where, you know how politicians have to stand up there, they poll America, and then they figure out, what does America want me to say? And then they have to say that if they want to be elected.
To write a script for it.
Yeah. So they're now going to have to be pro crypto. Think about that. They have to. If they had at all hard stances on crypto, they will not be elected. And that's where we're at in the fourth turning, which is amazing. And so part of that's going to introduce a whole new flywheel where they're likely that's going to be a talking point in the election. We've never seen that before. They're going to ask them, what are your stances going to be, Trump, when you come into office? What are you going to do with legislation around crypto? And then they're going to ask the other, so that's going to be big. And I believe they're likely going to issue new legislation. Like as soon as the president's in, it's going to be a thing of like, the middle class is suffering, like everyone's blah, blah, blah. Here's the average debt. Here's credit card debt. Here's student loan debt. Like, what are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Inflation, sticky inflation. And then it's going to be kind of this thing of like, okay, cool. Well, we're going to usher in new legislation around not only CBDCs, but I believe other cryptos as well. I've said this from the get-go. I don't believe we're just going to go from what we have now to one day, like ushering in like, okay, CBDC, you have to adopt it, or martial law and like held at gunpoint. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's much more going to be a thing of like taunting you with the carrot. Of like, we'll give you free money, and if you switch over to this one, like, and a lot of people are, dumb enough to do that. Mm-hmm. So I believe we will have options, and I think that's likely going to unlock other cryptos of choice: Bitcoin, Ethereum, Layer 1s, stable coins, and this type of thing. So the way I'm looking at it, it's the type of thing where the government's hand is basically forced now. The same game theory that's going to make PayPal have to make a move. It's going to make Coinbase have to make a move. It's going to make, Kraken and KuCoin and all these other places you can buy crypto. They have to do something, or no one will put liquidity on their platform, which is how they earn revenue. That's their entire business model. They take a sliver of it. The banks are going to have to do it. Now we're going to see the government. The government's a corporation too. Yeah. And they're harvesting our life force. So it's the biggest model, right? So their hand is going to be forced through the same game theory economics, where it's like they're looking at the data. They're like, shit, this thing's just not slowing down. Metcalfe's law, it just doubled again. 12.5% of the entire globe has adopted something. If they don't roll out legislation, that's going to be their downfall. And the downfall of the fiat dollar will be even swifter, because it's going to be very apparent why they're doing that. People are going to make their own decisions, and that's going to be that. In other words, people are going to use even less USD and trust our currency even more and flee from it if they don't. Yet if they do, we win anyway, because that's just going to accelerate the use case. Everyone's going to go, yay, it's normal now. All the normies who have to be told it's okay to do this before they'll do it, they're now going to go do that. And that's going to accelerate the use case, the legitimacy of crypto, and that it's here to stay for the masses. So either way they play, they're going to lose the poker game. Mm-hmm. That is amazing, an amazing situation.
The most amazing.
If you can imagine, less than 1 out of 10 people own crypto right now. So as common as it seems, we're literally in inning 1. If it's a 10-inning game, we're in inning 1.
Yeah.
And this is a generational opportunity. And price action, which is a fancy way of saying the price of a crypto asset or any asset, follows narratives. This is something I'm always teaching my students. The markets aren't logical. They follow narratives. And when big companies and or the government legitimize this to the masses, the news is going to be everywhere. It's going to go from, it was exactly like it was a Ponzi, blah, 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 it's illegal, it's for money laundering and criminals, to buy our new USDC or whatever stable coin. And like the government's going to have some stupid name for their CBDC. And then it's going to be everywhere. Trillions of dollars will be pumped into marketing it. It's going to be like you're going to get left behind if you're not in it all of a sudden. And it's literally in a year, and we're almost to that point, going to go from you're an idiot if you're entering these things, it's very risky, this isn't the way things have been done, to you're being left behind. The clock's ticking like everyone's doing it. And it's just going to switch like that. I'm letting you guys know. We'll see how this ages. And so when the news is everywhere, all the people who rely on the news for their information are now going to feel that they're going to be left behind if they don't take action. And it's literally just going to go from like that to that. Very opposite takes. And so to wrap up, this is what causes bull market runs. This is what causes peak hysteria in markets. If the markets were logical, then we would look at Metcalfe's law at any given time and there wouldn't be bear markets. There wouldn't be recessions because we'd see, oh, it's over a long enough time period. It's literally up and to the right. When you zoom out and you look at it on a logarithmic chart, which accounts for exponential growth of technology, it literally just looks like a linear line. But it doesn't feel like that when you hold it, does it? We go through these ebbs and these flows because of narratives. Narratives. This is the human aspect. If it was just AI cyborgs investing, it would just be a linear market. But it's humans. They get scared, then they get greedy, then they get scared, then they get greedy. Welcome to the financial markets. And so this is what humans will need to go, now I'm making a logical decision. The logical decision is to ape into crypto. And so that is going to be the biggest narrative we've seen, Aaron, because like we talked about today, up until today, the only use case for crypto has been that it's a store of value and that eventually it will be these things and we're here early. But that's a whole different type of person than saying, if you want to buy grapes from the store and not have your grapes cost 1.5x as much as they should, you need to buy it in this. Yep. And that will unlock the global economy. And so for those of us who have been positioned and are just chilling, this is when you make generational wealth. Congrats to all of our students. Congrats to those of you who listen and take action and started researching. You've had time, right? You've had months. And for those of you who haven't, this is another strong nudge to take the time to look into these things. For those of you who were tuning into our episode when we talked about the Bitcoin ETF and everything and who have paid attention to my content, you had a real opportunity to front run institutional adoption. We were talking about these things, I've been doing this for years, but even in the context of me and Aaron putting out videos, when Bitcoin was anywhere from 30K to 40K. And we're now considering a steep pullback and we're in the 60s. And so what's that going to look like in a year? What's that going to look like in a year of adoption? What's that going to look like when Metcalfe's law doubles? What's that going to look like when Chase Bank announces you can pay in crypto? Or all of a sudden we have credit card or debit card integrations with crypto. I mean, we don't know what the ceiling is of possibility with these technologies. And so it's very exciting. And if you're not currently heavily allocated or at least heavily researching crypto, right? Because you don't just want to heavily allocate. You start with research and understanding. You are actively choosing. I hope everyone is listening right now. You are actively choosing to overlook an opportunity to front run over 90% of global population that will eventually hold and store cryptocurrency. And the system that we're transitioning to very clearly for the next at least 120 years, whether it's for currency purposes, whether it's for separate currency and we have multiple of them, or whether it's just for store of value and it's more of an asset and investment, that's to be determined. But it is indisputable at this point that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is here to stay. It is the next iteration of the internet and of technology as we think of it, right? Computers and laptops and the World Wide Web. It is the next iteration of that. And so you have a real opportunity right now to invest in Apple in 2002, to invest in Microsoft in 1999, to invest in PayPal in 2006. But it's not without its ups and downs, its fears and all of that. And so the research needs to be there. And once the research has been done, you make the decision for yourself. None of this that we talked about today was financial advice. This is just me trying to give back This path and these skill sets have blessed me beyond belief. I don't need to be teaching anymore. When you understand how to invest in the financial markets and you've been consistent with it for long enough, you forever have a skill that can feed your family for the rest of your life. And that is what I want for more of our people, Aaron. Less of the protesting, less of the getting resentful of the system, more of the becoming more valuable, more of the becoming who you need to be that person for your family, to be the one who breaks the chains of poverty in your lineage, to be the example for your family, for your community, for your city, and for those that look up to you. So that's today's rant. Do with that information what you will, guys. I'm very excited and very optimistic for the next 12 to 18 months in the financial markets. Of course, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be volatile. But for those of us who can zoom out, take a long enough time frame to things, you have a real opportunity here. Talk to your grandparents or your great-grandparents about how good of a decision it was to buy real estate during that era, and maybe look up how much their property appreciated ask your grandfather what he bought his house for. My dad told me the other day that my grandpa bought his house for less than $15,000, and it's worth somewhere in the range of $700 to $800K today. Now that's an investment, Aaron. That's a generational opportunity, but we're not in that time period anymore. Now let's fast forward to when you have grandkids or I have grandkids. You know what what story we're going to tell?
Mm-hmm.
What price we bought Bitcoin and Ethereum at, and they won't believe us.
Yep.
They won't believe us.
Yep.
I'll leave it at that.
Dude, what an epic rant. Last thing I'll say on that is, first of all, thank you for bringing your gift to the show on, like, I see you as somebody who's, we're all in the ocean trying to catch a wave, and like, you're tuned into the waves and you're like, yo guys, paddle.
Yeah.
And, like, some people are just not listening. Other people are like, all right, Jeremy says paddle.
Yeah.
And you just start paddling, and then that wave starts to rise and you're like, oh shit, it's really coming. That's where I feel like we're at with crypto, and all we can do is keep saying paddle. And if people don't want to paddle, that's up to them. But it's like, just like you wouldn't have wanted to miss the internet boom in the 90s, you're not going to want to have missed this one, because it's going to be bigger than the internet boom was. I really do believe that. I mean, just the things you laid out there with the adoption with the payment platforms, like banks will be next, on and on and on. Like, this thing could go nuclear at any moment. And so, again, this is not financial advice, but like, if you have liquidity, like, now you know a good place to put it. And it's going to not only set you up, but your family up for another generation. If you can get ahead of that debt slave matrix threshold where you're just working to pay the bills, you get above that and you accrue some investments, then you're free and you've got your power back. And if this show's about anything, man, it's about teaching people how to get their power back. That's what the awakening is for humanity. So, I mean, we hope you guys were inspired by this episode. Thank you, bro, for bringing the heat as always. This was a really fun episode, and I feel like this was the most positive episode we've done yet.
Yeah, man, you brought excellent clips today, and I feel like we navigated everything from the climate to some law stuff to even like some of the food stuff to
culture stuff,
to the financial. So this is what we love to do, right? Like, kind of a little bit of everything, because it's all connected. So we hope you guys really appreciated this episode. We're sending you guys love as always. Let us know in the comments, what your favorite segment was, or any feedback you have for us. And we'll see you guys in May. Peace and love, everyone.
Y'all. Take care.